What's up guys? Welcome back to the channel Hand Waving. Your friend Naruto Addict 2.0 is here again with a brand new Naruto fanfic that's going to change everything. A story where Naruto is betrayed and banished. But destiny has bigger plans for him. From exile to emperor, this is the journey of power, strategy, and love. Today's fanfic is titled, What If Naruto Abandoned Konoha and Built a Western Empire with New Love? Yuuki, Eva, Hinata, Part 1. Naruto Uzumaki. Tales from the Western Empire. A regal-looking young man in his 20s with long spiking blonde hair wearing a loose-fitting orange robe with the Uzumaki symbol stitched onto the back. Under it he wore a simple black shirt and red pants. He sat alone on the bench looking at his reflection in the pond. The young man sighed. So much has happened in my life. Leaning back he looked towards the sky and closed his blue eyes remembering what had happened to him as a child. Konoha Hospital 10 years ago after successfully retrieving Uchiha Sasuke. The Uchiha Sasuke retrieval mission had succeeded. Kakashi and a Kage Bunshin carried both Naruto and Sasuke back into the village. Immediately medical staff came and collected both boys, rushing them to the hospital. Unfortunately, this was only the beginning of trouble for Naruto's life. A few days later, a bandaged Naruto sat in the hospital bed, tears running down his face. Before him stood Tsunade Godime of Konohagakure. Tsunade glared down at the boy with hate-filled eyes. Do you know what trouble you have caused? The destruction of the Valley of the End statues, aggravated assault on a clan head with intent to kill, excessive force, and to top it all off you used so much of the Kyuubi's chakra it could be felt from Konoha. You could have released the Kyuubi and killed us all. Tsunade screamed at Naruto. Why Ba-chan? Why are you treating me like this? He asked, not looking at his Ba-chan. His Hokage. Tsunade. You will call me Hokage-sama brat. Tsunade snapped back. Glaring at Naruto she continued, I'll have you know that the council has voted for your execution. No. Naruto screamed in his mind as he grabbed a handful of the blanket and looked up at Tsunade's smirking face, no longer fearing her look but now fearing for his life. Naturally there are those in the council who saved you from that fate. Snorting she moved to the window, no longer wishing to look at his puffy red eyes, under the ruling of the Godime Hokage and the council's winning vote. You Uzumaki Naruto, once you fully recover will have your chakra sealed up and you are forbidden from ever practicing the shinobi arts. Tsunade smirked as she turned to look Naruto. You will live your life as a civilian until we need you to die to save Konoha, and yes, you will never be Hokage. Smiling at Naruto, Tsunade walked out as she heard Naruto finally snap and begin to cry his heart out. Outside Naruto's room Sakura stood there smiling as she had heard everything. Watching Tsunade leave with a smile on her face she thought, you hurt my Sasuke-kun, a monster like you doesn't even deserve to live, she thought as she walked away, wanting to find and tell her friends what a monster Naruto is and how he is now. Easy pickings. A few days later, Naruto had snuck out of the hospital, leaving behind a Kage Bunshin. As he walked through the markets the civilians all looked on him and Naruto could hear everything they were saying. The demon got what he deserved. You know it is becoming a civilian again. Perhaps we can start up the fox hunt again. Since the demon's not allowed to fight back, perhaps we can finally end it. Covering his ears, Naruto ran as fast as he could, beelining it for his apartment until he ran into someone. Keeping his head down and covering his still healing body with his bandaged arms, he waited for the eventual yelling and possible beating, but instead heard the one thing he least expected. Hey kid, are you alright? Opening his eyes and looking up he saw who he had run into. He was shocked. This guy is huge. He's standing taller than Ero Sennin. And his hair is longer as well. Nice coat and whoa, what a scar, Naruto thought as he looked on in silence. The stranger before him squatted down in front of him and waved his hand in front of his face. Hey kid, everything okay? Naruto only nodded and okay. That's good, let me help you up. The stranger then suddenly grabbed the back of his jumpsuit and helped him up. Thank you, Naruto replied before he tried to walk past the stranger but was stopped by the sudden shouting of the civilians. Are you going to let that demon do as he wishes? Punish the little monster for running into you. Someone get a shinobi and tell them we saw the demon assault a traveler. Naruto kept his head down and covered his ears, trying to run past, only to stop when he felt the stranger place his hand on his shoulder and hold him there. The civilians cheered, hoping to see the brat get beaten again, but the area went dead quiet in an instant as the stranger filled it with his killer intent. Moving Naruto behind him, "Scum like you are the reason why the mighty fall so fast and so low," and with that he held onto Naruto's shoulder. He shunted away. Two Anbu agents revealed themselves and began to run off towards the Hokage's tower to report what had happened. But both Anbu were unaware that two sets of eyes were watching. One black eye and a set of ice-gray eyes, who all disappeared shortly after. Atop a building a short distance away. Letting the kid go, the tall stranger smiled and sat down, putting his hands up submissively. "The name's Yami and I don't mean you any harm," offering a hand to the kid. Naruto kept his head down as he didn't want Yami to see the sadness in his eyes and heart. Yami could feel the uneasy tension in the air. Smiling gently, he looked over the boy, who still had refused to lift his head up. "Well, where I'm from, it's a sign of a beginning friendship to learn what one's name is, so may I ask for your name, kid?" This seemed to snap Naruto out of his mood as he slowly looked at Yami. "The name's Uzumaki Naruto." The short second eye contact was all Yami needed. He could see the sadness within this boy. He is barely a teenager, and yet why does it seem he shoulders the weight of the world on his shoulders, Yami thought to himself. Then an idea struck and Yami began to grin. "Tell me, Naruto, where can one find a good meal around here? My friend and I haven't eaten a decent meal in over a week." Naruto's lips twitched into a small smile, then his trademark fox grin and the brightness of life showed in his eyes. "Of course I do. Ichiraku's ramen stand is the only place you should eat." Naruto proudly yelled as he widened his arms and waved them around, wincing in pain as he forgot that he was still recovering. Yami let out a good laugh. "Careful there, kid," and quickly picked up Naruto and sat him on his shoulder. "Whoa, Takai-san, don't drop me." Naruto yelled as he was lifted up quickly. "Don't worry, kid, I will not drop ya." And with that leapt off the building. "Now which way, my ramen bloodhound?" Naruto pointed to their left and Yami began to walk that way. On top of the building next to where Naruto and Yami are talking, Kakashi had appeared on the opposite building the moment the stranger had brought Naruto to and was eavesdropping in on the conversation. "Who are you really, Yami?" Kakashi thought as he watched from the shadows how this stranger, Yami, seemed to brighten up Naruto slightly, and Kakashi smiled slightly under his mask. "Better collect Naruto and return him to the hospital before Tsunade-sama gets to him," Kakashi whispered and prepared to jump down. "You know it's rude to eavesdrop on a private conversation and planning to crash their meal." Kakashi froze as he heard someone whisper softly into his ear as he felt a finger push against the back of his neck. "How did she sneak up on me?" Kakashi panicked as he lifted his arms up. Ma, there is no need for violence, is there, miss?" Kakashi whispered back. "No, there isn't. Yet in my name as well. You would like that, wouldn't you, Hitaki Kakashi?" As she slowly removed her finger from his neck. Kakashi spun around, kunai drawn, but saw no one around him. How did she do that? Kakashi thought as he quickly shunted away. Ichiraku's ramen. Yam tried to sit on the stool provided as casually as he could, even though his knees were hitting the table. "Damn my bloody height," Yami growled as he tried to sit down comfortably. Naruto looked upon Yami with a more interest. Besides his height all and his ridiculously long hair, he's wearing a plain black traveling coat and black shinobi pants. He's got that long scar over his left eye. Other than that, don't see any kind of weapon on him. What else he is capable of, Naruto thought as he watched Yami try to sit down comfortably. "Oh, customers, welcome to Naruto. Aren't you supposed to still be in hospital?" Ichiraku asked as he appeared from the back of his shop and shook his head as he looked at Naruto. "Even when you're broken or near death, my ramen always brings you back. Hehe, maybe I should use that as advertisement." Ichiraku laughed as he pulled out two menus. "Now what would you two like?" Yami smirked as he placed the menu to his left. "Don't you mean three?" As suddenly in a swirl of water around the stool to Yami's left revealed a young kunoichi in a light blue traveling kimono, long white hair like Yami's. "And you thought I'd let you have ramen alone, hey Yami?" She giggling before leaning forward and waved friendly to Naruto. Hi there blondie, name's Yuuki, slapping Yami's back. I see you already meet my traveling mule. Naruto cracked up laughing as Yami turned and glared at Yuuki with his poison green eyes. And who do you think is going to pay for all the ramen you're going to eat, Yuki-chan? Yami replied with a grin. Throwing her arms up, Yuuki yelled, I'll be good, I'll be good. Chuckling and letting Naruto get back on his stool, the three made their order and began to eat their meals. 5 minutes later, Naruto had eaten 2 bowls where Yami and Yuuki had both eaten through 3 bowls each. Not fair, Datbayo. Naruto cursed as he watched his new ramen-loving friends devour bowl after bowl of ramen. If I wasn't still injured, I'd be on my 5th bowl now, getting a chuckle and a giggle from said ramen lovers. Well, as I said, kid, we haven't eaten in over a week and we are starving. Yuuki grinned. Ration bars suck. They ruin my figure, she said as she took her 4th bowl. Anosa Anos, Yami, can you tell me how you got that scar over your eye? Naruto asked before he began to drink down the broth. Yuuki stopped eating and with puffy cheeks looked to Yami, who was gently running his finger down his scar, and sadly smiled. That, my friend, is for another time. Returning to finishing off his bowl, he looked to Naruto and asked innocently, so why are you all banged up so badly? Get into a fight or something? Naruto dropped his head and went dead silent. Something bad happened, all right. Naruto all but whispered out, trying to hold back the tears. Sorry kid, I didn't mean to bring back any bad memories, Yami said as he reached out to pat his back but instantly spun around on his stool and caught the wrist of someone reaching out to grab Naruto. Now you can't be so rough, Yami said as he tightened his grip on the arm of a Konoha Junin. Let go of me this instant or face punishment, the one-eyed Junin growled. Naruto turned around. Kakashi-sensei. What's happening? Naruto asked as he looked on in confusion. Naruto, as your sensei, I'm ordering you to get away from them now. Kakashi ordered Naruto as his other hand went into his pouch. These two are foreigners and possibly Nuke Nin, Yuuki growled at Kakashi, honestly. You think that just by looking at us? I mean, look at me, I'm gorgeous. As Yuuki protested. Still, such hostility is ill-advised. I'm sure as peaceful visitors wandering shinobi or not, we do have protection rights, Yami said as he let go of Kakashi's arm. In turn, Kakashi grabbed and pulled Naruto behind him, ignoring his short cry in pain as Kakashi brought a kunai in front of him. I don't know who you both are, but you are not allowed to interact with Naruto, as Kakashi slowly moved away from the two. And who are you to say that? Everyone was treating him like shit, so I decided to be nice and give him a free meal, and since I'm showing kindness, I'm being told to stay away. Yami growled as he dropped a wad of Ryo onto the counter as he turned his full attention to the one-eyed Junin. There are reasons that are beyond your allowed knowledge as to why he is treated as such, Kakashi replied as he began to back off with Naruto behind him. Kakashi-sensei. Stop it, they are nice and aren't doing anything wrong. They are my friends. Naruto tried to protest. Don't believe that for a second, Naruto. They could be spies for all we know. Until they are cleared by Anko and Ibiki, Kakashi replied. Spies? Yuuki and Yami growled as they exited the small stand. Both were surrounded by Anbu soldiers wielding various weapons. What is the meaning of this? Yuuki yelled as she went back to back against Yami as they watched a blonde-haired woman appear and walk to Naruto. Uzumaki, Naruto, what the hell are you doing? She yelled as she smacked his head, sending him into the ground and putting her foot on his head. You were confined to the hospital until your sealing, you little shit. I'll need Inoichi to erase your jutsus as well. She yelled. Kakashi was shocked. What sealing, Hokage-sama? Why does Naruto need that? Kakashi inquired as he kept his attention on the two suspects. That is not your concern, Kakashi. Anbu, remove this village shit stain to the holding cells until he is recovered. Kakashi was shocked and dropped his guard. He took his eyes off the pair in sheer disbelief. Tsunade-sama would never say such things like that to Naruto of all people. Yuuki and Yami were shocked as well. Is this how a child is treated in this village? Yami thought as his hair slowly started to shift. Now, evacuate. Yami yelled as he dropped several smoke bombs from his hair, exploding dark purple smoke around the Anbu. Yuuki, knowing what he meant, and lunged between Tsunade and Kakashi. Dropping her own smoke bomb, she went at Naruto, grabbing him and jumped towards Yami, who grabbed her and promptly shunshed away. Outside Konoha's gates and began to run off. Naruto over his shoulder passed out. Damn it, Anbu, find them. Tsunade screamed as she tried to blow the smoke away, only to be met with her Anbu immediate gasping loudly, Anbu, get out of the smoke and get them. She roared again, ignoring the obvious signs that Kakashi picked up on, immediately flashing through several hand seals, futon, datappa no justu, and blew the smoke away, only to reveal what had happened to the Anbu. "Oh, Kami-sama," Kakashi said as he quickly brought a hand over his masked mouth and tried to hold down his lunch. "I haven't seen poison like this before," he thought. Tsunade just stood there shaking like a leaf, her hemophobia kicking into full drive as she looked at her Anbu. Lying on the floor, her Anbu squad were gasping for air as their skin and blood had turned purple and was pouring out of every orifice very quickly. It only took a few seconds for them to bleed out to death. There they both stood until another squad of Anbu led by Shizune appeared. "Tsunade-sama." Shizune yelled as she grabbed her shisho and keeping her calm. "Kakashi-senpai, what happened?" A Anbu asked Kakashi. "Naruto has being kidnapped," he replied before running to the alley and throwing up. Present day. As Naruto relaxed on his bench contently sleeping, a pair of ice-gray eyes locked onto the sleeping figure on the bench, grinning. "Too perfect," Yuuki thought as she snuck up, and with evil glinting in her eyes she raised the water bomb above her head. "Payback's a bitch," she yelled as she slammed it onto Naruto's head. "Ha, gotcha." She screamed in joy and danced away as Naruto immediately woke up and started throwing his own obscenities at Yuuki and began to chase her around the palace, throwing paint bombs at Yuuki. "My garden is a prank-free zone," he yelled as he chased after her. A room on the other side of the palace. Yami was currently sitting on his chair, looked up from his mortar and pestle and stopped grinded his ingredients. Looks like Yuuki got the emperor back." Chuckling, he returned to his grinding. "Just a few more ingredients and I think that will be it," he muttered to himself as he dropped another handful of mushroom spores into the mix and mixing it with a liquid agent. "Hee, the most deadly poison I've created to date," Yami said to himself as he poured the solution into a red skull-shaped bottle. Corking the bottle, Yami grinned. "There, I'm finally due," was all he said before the doors of his lab went flying at his head, knocking him unconscious. 1 hour later, Yuuki and Naruto sat in front to each other, glaring at each other, both their outfits covered in various paint stains and were both drenched, as Yami, who was also drenched in various solutions, had them tied down in ninja wire. "Seriously, you two, how did Yuki's revenge attack turn into destroying my lab?" Yami cried out as he picked them both up. "You have purple water lilies that need to be harvested." As he threw Yuuki out of the wire into the hallway towards her room. "And you, Naruto, have an empire to run." As he just threw him out the window to the palace ponds. Naruto's only response on the way down into the palace pond was, "Worth it." Comma 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 comma. And now some slight translations. Takai-san. Takai in Japanese is referred to people who are tall, so essentially it's tall man. Shunshin no Jutsu, body flicker technique. The body flicker technique is a high-speed movement technique, allowing a ninja to move short to long distances at an almost untraceable speed. Futon. Datappa no Justu, wind release, great breakthrough. This is a relatively simple technique that creates a sudden gust of wind. Well, that's chapter 1. Please read and review Laughing Face. My OCs will have their own storyline within to explain their pasts, and yes, there will be Naruhina goodness. But not right now. Have to set the stage, so to speak. And to a certain someone, sorry it took so long. It's hard fighting off a writer's block. Yes, that's my excuse and I'm using it. I hope to be able to update my story at 2 weeks minimum. Please do read and review. Does help a starting writer like me. Laughing Face. What did Yuuki and Yami do to Naruto? Why is he an emperor? And why is Tsunade such a bitch? The morning sun was shining brightly over the imperial city Amaterasu. We find our young emperor in his private training field located within the sacred Shishigami's forest. A lone safe passage ensures that the ancient demons and gods are not unnecessarily disturbed by travelers, though many of them do stay hidden in the foliage and watch the young emperor train. His Majesty sure does attract quite the attention these days, said a man dressed in a tight, fitted suit. Smiles as he adjusts his monocle and looks into the forest. Walking down said path towards the emperor's training down. I should really encourage sir to stop traveling so deep. Surely he is bothering some of the ancient guardians, he spoke to himself as he began his journey to the clearing. Upon reaching the clearing, he could see over 1,000 copies of his emperor training in various sections of the clearing, some in ninjutsu, others in taijutsu, and some on scrolls improving their fuin no jutsu, but it was the one sitting on the large stone right near the foliage speaking to a group of kodama that caught his attention. He approached the emperor. I enjoy your presence here just as much as any other deity who wishes to watch me. Perhaps one day you shall all grace me with the honor of following you around your forest. Naruto asked, smiling to the small spirits from his sitting position, to which they all began to click their heads happily. My emperor, I must apologize for intruding on your morning training, and bowed before his emperor, but the council's request your presence this afternoon. We have received some new reports and some information that needs your attention. Waving off his little friends, Naruto turned to the well-dressed man. Now Walter, what have I asked from you? As his cage bunchen slowly began to dispel, in small groups, his eyebrow and lip twitching now and again from the new information he received. Walter smiled. You have asked me every day for the last 1825 days to refer to you as Naruto or Uzumaki-san, not Uzumaki-sama, and definitely to stop calling you Emperor, sir, Walter replied back with a smile as he handed his emperor a small towel. Naruto let out a short laugh before taking the towel. Thank you, Walter. Taking the towel, he wiped his face down and walked alongside him back down the path. I swear one day you will call me Uzumaki-san at least. Both let out a laugh as they began to walk down the path to return to the imperial palace. However, from the forest's foliage they were both being watched unknowingly. The deity watching them from the foliage slowly began to walk out to the middle of the field. Its 12 earth-brown horns shining just as brightly as its golden-brown pelt. Around its feet the grass and flowers grew rapidly before they withered away. Its near-human face smiled and its leaf-green eyes gently look upon the young sun-kissed blonde boy. Perhaps one day I shall let you walk with me, young one, it thought to itself before turning away and walking back into its forest. The royal palace, in the middle of Amaterasu. Naruto walked down one of the many hallways, leading to the council meeting room. Along the way he tugged on his royal kimono. Bloody, stuffy and annoying. Why can't they just let me wear my jumpsuit or something more plain? Grumbling, he kept walking down until he heard a jolly laugh behind him. That is because, Your Highness, first impressions and formality are an essential aspect of ruling an empire. Naruto smiled and turned around. Before him stood an old monk, dressed in his religious robes, one hand holding a set of prayer beads while his other hand was open wide, anticipating his emperor's next move. Ah, Hachima-san. It's wonderful to see you again, embracing his most trusted and dear old friend in a hug. Together they walked to the council meeting, engaging in small talk between. So Hachima-san, how goes your acolytes of the Brotherhood? Naruto inquires as he walked with him. Hachima chuckled as he placed his prayer beads inside his robes, and proceeded to pull out another set which wound itself around his arm on its own will. Ah, the Brotherhood grows stronger every day, Naruto-sama. Hachima grinned, and if you would like to know, the sisterhood led by Toyoko-san is growing just as strongly. I am representing her for today. She is unable to attend today's meeting due to personal reasons. Nodding, Naruto changed the subject to recent events, mainly the massive prank war between his close friend Yuuki and Yami, to which Hachima found quite amusing up until trashing Yami's lab and the revenge prank against Yami. Meanwhile at said lab, Yami growled loudly, his ankle-length white hair spiked outwards as he looked at his workbench, pure bloodlust rolling off him as he looked at the sight before him. You son of bitch. Revenge will be mine. Yami roared and proceeded to rummage through his poison cabinet searching for the poison needed in his revenge. For if one was to look on the workbench, you could see that all his equipment and the table itself was all colored bright pink and with love hearts all over it. His ingredients that were in the cabinet next to the workbench had being replaced with girls' makeup, glitter and other cutesy crap, and to top it all off, a big sign hanging off the wall stating, "The Princess Creation Workbench. Back with Naruto and Hachima." Naruto stopped walking and began to shiver violently. Hachima turned and looked upon Naruto. "I feel a disturbance in the prankness," as if 1,000 pranksters shouted out in pride and were suddenly murdered into silence. Naruto spoke with absolute fear in his voice. Hachima smiled and replied with only 5 words. "In grave danger, you are." Trying to shake it off, Naruto and Hachima arrived at the council doors guarded by 2, as Naruto had given the squadron's name, the Shinobi Samurais, or SS as some called them. Greeting them both personally, they bowed in respect to both their emperor and Hachima-sama, the first brother, and proceeded to open the doors, revealing a 10-meter-long flat table and 2 meters wide. At the end of the table, a elevated platform allowed the seater to look down the table, signifying the authority the person had while sitting there. The 9 waiting members who have been waiting at the side of the room all bowed together. "Greetings, Your Highness and Hachima-sama," to which Hachima and Naruto bowed in return. Taking his seat, Naruto smiled smugly and tapped the hammer on the little wooden anvil. Naruto smiled. "I love you, little hammer," he smugly thought to himself. "Well, let's get down to business, everyone. I call to start the 68th council meeting. Please everyone be seated and let's begin," Naruto announced in a regal tone. Meanwhile, in the city of Amaterasu, Yuuki was grinning ear to ear as she hauled her tail back to the palace. "I got it, I got it, I got it, I got it," she chanted as she, ninja, ran across the buildings and through the palace gates, running up the stairs and began to run down to her supply room. As she was about to grab the door handle, she felt a chill run up and down her spine. Surely the package isn't leaking. It should be sealed up correctly, she thought as she turned around, only to freeze on the spot as she locked eye to eye with Yami's glowing poison green eyes. "Did you or did you not assist the Emperor in his prank against me?" Yami softly spoke with all the venom and promise of death in his tone of voice. No, Yami, I didn't," Yuuki screamed, throwing her arms up into the air. "I learned last time what happens when I mess with your lab." Yuuki began to panic, not noticing she had let go of her package. "Oh, Kami-sama, I'm gonna die," she was screaming in her head. Her package hitting the floor caused Yami to break eye contact with Yuuki and lock onto it. A barely audible shink was heard as Yami looked intensely at the package. "So, you finally acquired a block of it. Must have given them something very precious to get that." Yami spoke and stood up, flicking his wrists. A sharp snap was heard. "Do well to avoid me for the rest of the day, Yuki-chan. For I don't want you be caught in the crossfire," Yami said as he slowly sank into the shadows, returning to his continued hunt. Yuuki dropped to the floor, shaking like a leaf. She hugged her package tightly. "Yami's going to be very pissed when he realizes what I did to him to get this block of ice," she thought to herself before she finally noticing the coldness of water running over her hand. Looking down, she saw the slash tear on the paper seal, which was melting off slowly, showing off the light ice blue glow from the block of ice inside. Back in the council room. "And that is the report on the marketplace and real estate, Your Majesty," a council member proudly reported. Looking up at his emperor, who was smiling in return. "Thank Kami, that's over," Naruto thought to himself. "Thank you, Takana-san. Now I do believe it's the defense head council member's turn to report," Naruto spoke, turning to the defense council member. A man who looked like a great elderly grandfather with a bald head and his beard reaching the floor, wearing a simple black kimono and white coat, stood up, with the support of his cane. "My dear Emperor, it pleases me to say that Battalions 4 and 5 have finished their final leg of training and will be graduating from the Royal Shinobi Samurai College." Picking up a folder and passing it to a council aide to pass on to the Emperor, It seems that the extra 3 months I proposed to the current curriculum has proven greatly beneficial, as you can see by the reports." The old man smiled and returned to his seat. Naruto read over the report slowly. It seems that Genryusai was right. Damn it, I gotta buy him dinner for the next 3 months. Damn him. Naruto then looked at the date for the graduation ceremony. In 2 weeks, he muttered to himself. Looking up from his report and down to Genryusai, he smiled. Excellent work. Please on my behalf congratulate everyone on the course and tell them to hold their heads high. Genryusai smiled and bowed. It will be an honor, my emperor. Before the next person could speak, there was a loud banging at the door before they were thrown open, revealing one of the royal guards running to Naruto's side and dropped to his knee. My emperor, forgive me for intruding on your meeting, but we have an intruder in the city and is approaching the palace. Naruto's eyes widened. No one has been able to set foot uninvited in this empire for the last 5 years, he thought to himself. Rising from his seat and, tell me, is there a description of the intruder? And have they been alerted? The guard only nodded his head. Yes, sir. Fox has been alerted and your personal guards are being alerted as we speak. And here is the description of the intruder, pulling out a scroll and presenting it before Naruto. Quickly taking the scroll, he opened it and read the contents. Within a few seconds, killer intent was indirectly released by Naruto. Everyone in the room. The council members on the civilian side all collapsed unconsciously, while the clan defense force side all stiffened and tried to stay conscious. This cannot be. Naruto growled as his anger grew. Kit, calm down. I'm trying to sleep. The Kyuubi no Kitsune growled telepathically to his host. I'm sure you don't want another repeat at Sarutahiko Port now. To which Naruto began to calm down. Thank you, Kurama. Naruto thanked back as he turned to the council. My apologies, everyone, but I must go and retrieve my gear and attended to this matter at hand. Clutching the edge of the scroll, he walked to the open doors, informing the guards to call for some medics to treat the council members. I call this meeting on hold until this has been dealt with. And with that, Naruto left the room and saw his personal guard Yami leaning against the wall. Sorry, Yami. Was all he said before hurrying to his chambers, dropping the scroll in the process. Yami leaned against the wall outside the council room, breathing deeply, trying to keep himself upright as he watched Naruto run down the corridor. No matter how many times I try. The killer intent of a Jinchuriki at peace with his Biju. Looking down, he saw the scroll and picked it up. His eyes widened slightly as he read the report. That bastard, Yami growled as he dropped the scroll and took off to his room. The SS guards who were outside the room called for medical aid after managed to recover themselves. A short time later, a samurai with a royal crest on his helmet noticed the scroll discarded on the floor. Picking it up and reading it over, he spoke out the last few words of the report in disbelief. Eyewitness reports and stored records confirm that the intruder is that of the Eastern spymaster known as the Gama Sennin, Jiraiya of Konohagakure. With that, the SS pushed to intercom button on his helmet. This is the Royal Head Guard Satoshi, ID number 05133342, priority report. He spoke as he quickly moved into the chambers with the medics and guards with the council members and sealed it from the inside. Get the Fox 9 to assist in restraining the Emperor. In an alleyway in the city of Amaterasu. If one could put a word on what he was feeling right now, the only thing to mind was simple. He was scared for his life. Jiraiya, the Gama Sennin, hurried to another alleyway and ran down it, trying to conceal himself as best he could as he heard the thundering noise of squads of shinobi and samurai hunting him down. I had a bad feeling about this, but no. You just had to follow up on that rumor Naruto's out here. Jiraiya spoke to himself as he hid himself behind a dumpster, focusing his chakra down to unreadable levels. I can't let myself get caught. I've gotta find Naruto and get out of here, Jiraiya said, trying to motivate himself as he pulled out an old and worn-out photo. I'm so sorry I didn't stand up for you when I should have. Naruto, tears gently rolled down his face. The picture showed a young 12-year-old Naruto with Jiraiya, Tsunade Shizune and Tun the pig. The picture being taken a few days after they all had recovered well enough after the fight with Orochimaru to begin their trip back to Konoha. Pocketing the picture, Jiraiya speed off towards another alleyway, unaware that a set of blue-gray eyes were watching him. This is Snake. Fox member's target has being located. Transmitting coordinates. The deep-voiced man spoke as he slowly moved, his Maisegakur no Jutsu slightly waving as he seemed to slither along the ground. Jiraiya ran down the alleyway, finally reaching an entrance into the main street that headed to the Imperial Palace, wishing that there was a crowd to slip into and hide from any potential pursuers. Ensuring that he wasn't being followed, he made a beeline down the street, heading straight for the main gates. Jiraiya was all but unaware that he was already being monitored and followed by the Fox member Snake. HQ, this is Snake. Target has converged onto the main street and heading to the palace's southern gate. Permission to engage and terminate the intruder. Snake asked over his headset, slowly slipped his hand over his forearm, gently gripping his tanto, and slowly began to slide it out of its sheath. Permission denied. Engage in non-aggressive tactics as the IT department wants to get their hands on him and find out why he is entering our lands. Should he enter the palace, break off and regroup in chamber, Prime Emperor's personal guards will deal with him. After sheathing his tanto and ensuring his cover was not blown, Snake began to follow the intruder towards the castle, his hand resting on the Fukiya o his hip, and proceeded to follow the intruder. Imperial Palace Southern Gate. Jiraiya slowly approached the gate wall. Damn, now that's a well-built wall, Jiraiya muttered to himself as he looked up the 20-foot wall guarding the palace. Might need some help here. Quickly biting his thumb, he summoned a large toad. Hey Gamatsunoko, can you help me over the wall? The toad croaked loudly and beckoned Jiraiya to climb onto him. Hold on, Jiraiya-sama, the toad spoke just as it prepared to jump. That's when Jiraiya heard the soft pop and felt a sudden pain shoot through his left thigh. Looking down, he saw a 1-inch sendon needle sticking into it. Shit, go go go, Jiraiya yelled, quickly pulled the dart out and estimated its trajectory and saw a man in what looked like a gray snake skin patterned bodysuit taking aim with his Fukiya. Gamatsunoko leapt into the air just in time as another Senbon needle impeded itself into the wall. Single quote, exclamation mark, single quote. Shit, he spotted me, Snake mumbled with the blow dart in his mouth, quickly forming a few hand seals. Ninpo. Fukusu Senbon no Jutsu. Blowing hard, the blowgun let off a swarm of Senbon needles towards Jiraiya and his summoned toad. Luckily for Jiraiya, the toad managed to flip in mid-air. Jiraiya, jump off me, Gamatsunoko shouted as his armor belly plating was barraged by the needles. Thanks, I'll treat you good. Jiraiya yelled back as he fell towards the ground on the inside of the wall. Dispelling quickly to give Jiraiya a decent smoke screen, Snake cursed out loudly. HQ, this is Snake. Target evaded capture and is now inside the palace grounds. Confirmed only one hit with my Trank Senbon needle, Snake called out over his communicator. Roger that, Snake. Fall back to base and await further orders. Grunting a reply, Snake stood up and cracked his back before taking off to the eastern side of the city. Inside the palace garden, Jiraiya landed with a loud thud as he quickly rolled over into the bushes. Damn it, that's gonna leave a mark. He quickly inspected his thigh and felt its numbness. Damn it, the bastard hit me with some kind of poison, probably a knockout drug. Quickly rummaging through his vest, Jiraiya pulls out a small vial and downs it immediately. Gotta thank Tsunade and her pink-haired mini-me for that. Pocketing the empty vial and slowly standing up, Jiraiya slowly made his way through the garden. There has to be an open window or door somewhere. Eva, a voice called out. Jiraiya slipped against a thick koda tree. Shit, I've being spotted already. Jiraiya thought as he slowly slipped his hand into his pouch and pulled out a kunai and waited. Yes, Wally. A sweet feminine voice called out and caused Jiraiya to activate his pervy mode and peek out from the tree, and Jiraiya could only gawk. Standing before him was a young lady, wearing a form-fitting white kimono, matching her white hair, and deep blue eyes. Oh ho ho ho, very nice, Jiraiya muttered to himself and looked at the young man. Oh, Jiraiya was intrigued as he looked at the young man, kneeling down in yellow overalls and was apparently planting new seeds and little sprouts into the garden. He watched as Wally picked up one of the small garden pot, standing up to Eva. He held it out in his hand and watched in sheer amazement as the plant began to grow. Mokutan. Jiraiya muttered as the potted plant grew into a small sakura bonsai. Eva, smiling, took the pot plant gently from Wally and took in its scent. It's lovely, Wally. Smiling, she handed it back to him as Wally whistled happily, slightly blushing as he knelt down and removed it from its pot gently and planted it in the garden. I'll have to make a note of this, Jiraiya mumbled as he slowly moved from the koda tree, while the two weren't watching and stealthily made his way past them. Further down, Jiraiya saw something he liked and smiled. Bingo, he quickly made his way to the open window he spotted. Checking it for traps, he smiled when he found none and quickly jumped in. Unknown to Jiraiya, Eva had followed him slowly against the wall and smiled when he jumped in the window. Returning to Wally, she very discreetly pushed a button on her kimono sleeve. Target has entered the palace. Roger, Eva, informing Fox now. Maintain guard of Wally, came her response. Smiling, Eva squatted down next to Wally, gently placing her hand on his head and slowly stroking the scar hidden by his bleach blonde hair. Oh, Wally, she sadly thought as she watched Wally slowly make the small bonsai tree grow into the size of a small bush. Inside the palace, Naruto was furious. Why? He screamed in his head as he put on his battle armor. His cage bunshin's asterisk assisting him where he could not reach. He ruined my life and never once bothered to track me down. Why now after 10 years? He thought as he looked himself in the mirror. Dressed in blood-red colored samurai armor, customized for shinobi work, he watched as his clones helped put on his kabuto and his demon mask. Looking at his reflection, he mentally thanked the Kyoto family and the Muramasa family for constructing his armor. Not only did the armor help hide his appearance from everyone, with the exception of testing it against a Hyuga, it also allowed Naruto's chakra to be totally masked, hiding its signature from even the most experienced sensors. My emperor, shall I retrieve this invader for you and allow you to relax in the throne room with some honey green tea? Naruto's thought was broken by Walter's question as he turned to greet him. His cage bunchins dispelled and then he realized that there were several other people in the room. That being 2 Fox Elite members, Walter and Yami. Giving them all a look that mean business, Naruto spoke. I am sorry everyone, but this is my fight. It's my past and my problems. He turned back around to the mirror, checking his face mask is secured to his kabuto, and tied off a crimson red, yellow sheathed katana to his left side. Please, for your safety, I advise you to stay out of my way. Naruto then began to walk out. He was cut off by one of the Fox shinobi. Naruto-sama, you don't have to fight. Naruto looked upon the masked fox and smiled softly. This was the best of Fox, coincidentally code-named Fox. His mask was unique to everyone else in Fox. Where a normal Fox member would have a face mask that represented an animal or an element, his demon mask covered his entire head, and on his mask only had what looked like a blood orange fox eye in the middle of the mask and 2 lines running from it to the side to the back of his head. Think Obito, Toba's mask, but bone white with no eye slots. His body was encased in a unique chakra armor bodysuit which also held strapped firmly to his back his personal odachi, the fox blade. One cyber cookie to those who can guess who this is. Cheeky smiley face. I am sorry Fox, but this is my fight. Naruto tried to persuade Fox and push past him, but Fox refused to move. Not out of disrespect but of duty. I am unable to allow you to take this intruder by yourself. This is an act of aggression upon not only the Empire but on yourself as well. Even if this supposed intruder was only trying to seek an audience with you. A certain white-haired senin sneezed at this moment. Fox. Naruto tried to speak but was quickly cut off by Fox again. You have brought peace and prosperity to this land, and we are the ones who will be your hand of force in these times of peace. He stood in front of his Fox squad and continued. We swore on the day when you took the throne and made this broken country become the flourishing empire it is today. We, opening his arms to indicate the Fox members and Yami in the room, we would fight for your behalf. You need not have to fight anymore. Silence hung in the air for a moment, then a Fox member wearing a mask representing lightning stepped next to Fox. You have suffered so much, now it's our time to fight. A raspy voice spoke behind the lightning mask. Our swords and our lives are your instrument and tool of justice and peace. Another cookie to those who can guess who this is. Cheeky smiley face. Inazuma. Naruto was flabbergasted. Behind Naruto's mask, tears started to form. Such loyalty is not received but given freely. Kid, remember that. Kurama spoke to him before returning to his sleep. You know you can't win against them, Naruto. Yami sighed. They all swore a blood off the day you saved them all, remember? Naruto nodded, remembering how he came across the now members of Fox and how he saved them all from their personal hell. The Fox members all knelt down, various weapons drawn out and held over their heart. Command us and we shall deliver, they all spoke at once, bowing their heads down to their emperor. Sniffing loudly behind his demon mask, Naruto removed it, tears rolling down his face. Thank you, all of you, though the result was not what he expected. Everyone in the room laughing their heads off. Quote. What are you laughing at? Naruto roared as Walter, while trying to refrain from laughing, pointed to the mirror to which Naruto looked into and froze solid. His face was covered in women's makeup, making him look like a geisha, though it was running down his face because of his tears. But it was across his forehead, in highlighted purple, the glittered words of the prettiest princess. Turning to the group, his eyes locked onto Yami and glared at him. Seriously? Now of all times? Well, you did give me the instruments of my revenge. Yami roared with laughter, to which Naruto surprisingly joined in and laughed as he remembered supplying Yami indirectly with the makeup. Thank you, everyone. Smiling and sitting down as Walter suddenly appeared by his side, wiping off most of the makeup, mainly the purple title on his forehead. Go wait in the throne room, Emperor, and we will bring him to you. Walter's ice-cold voice rattled through the room as the sound of twanging wire was heard as Yami flicked out his hidden blades. I have a bone to pick with him as well, and it will be fun to see how my new test gerbil goes against my new poisons, Yami evilly chuckled. Then it hit everyone. Where's Yuuki? Naruto asked before they all heard a high-pitched male scream, and all the men for some unknown reason covered their groins in fear. Hell hath no fury of a pissed-off woman, Yami quietly said as he left the room and began to hunt down Yuuki as her shouting, though incoherent, and the deathly screams of Jiraiya echoed through the palace. One by one the members left the room, with Walter being the last. Your tea will be awaiting your arrival in the throne room, Emperor. Bowing, Walter shut the door and hurried off, leaving Naruto alone, assuming he would proceed to the throne room. They should have learned by now, Naruto chuckled, and with a single hand seal. Poof. The Naruto left behind was in fact a cage bunchen. During discussion time with the shadow clone Naruto, Jiraiya had landed inside the room with the open window and slowly made his way to the door. Finally, I've made it inside and undetected. Well, besides being detected outside, he thought as he started to move into the hallway and slowly run from corridor to corridor. Now this is getting very risky, he thought to himself as he peered around the corner of a doorway to watch a squad of royal guards run down the corridors. I gotta be quick and either run into Naruto and get him out of here or find the Emperor, muttering to himself as he continued his search. Unknowingly, from the real Naruto stood in his full armor, and if one could see behind the mask they would that his golden eyes were softly glowing and his face was a mixture of confusion and disbelief on his face. Kurama, is what I'm feeling right? Naruto mind spoke to Kurama. It is Kit, the Gamma Sennin. His true feelings are full of regret, the Kyuubi replied. Naruto's mind was racing. He still cares. After everything he did and left me. Probably just a guilty conscience, but then again he has poorly infiltrating an empire to seek its emperor to try and find me. His thoughts were suddenly cut as he felt a soft burning sensation on his right arm. Gently holding his arm he softly spoke, perhaps. I'll see what he wants, and I'll act accordingly. Pushing the talk button on his communicator set he spoke, attention all units. Capture the target alive and bring him before me. Releasing the button he continued to watch Jiraiya, following him on the ceiling hidden from view. And he froze as he saw Jiraiya stop and look up towards him. Wait a minute. Jiraiya stopped mid-run and turned around looking up to the ceiling. I'm sure I felt someone there. I felt its chakra, Looking towards the ceiling, he tried to locate where he felt the chakra presence. Must be paranoid, Jiraiya muttered before running down another corridor. I've gotta hurry. Where are you, Naruto? Naruto let out a sigh of relief and watched Jiraiya run off. Well, I better make my way then, Naruto muttered as he shunshin away. After a few minutes of running down various hallways and corridors, Jiraiya let off a light chuckle. He was pretty amazed by the palace's architecture and saw just down the corridor before two very large doors. Looking behind him, he saw the steps that lead outside. If I wasn't intruding, I would have loved a tour of this palace. As he rounded the corner and started to make his way to what he assumed was the throne room until he heard rattle rattle. Huh. Looking up, his eyes widen in horror at the sight in front of him. Then a soft woman's voice spoke. Megan Kurakashi Akumu no Jutsu. Jiraiya could only look in horror as the genjutsu took hold and only muttered. Lamia. Jiraiya's genjutsu nightmare. Konoha Anbu ceiling facility. Jiraiya walked into the ceiling room, seeing the three village elders and Tsunade, her hand holding onto the traitor's left shoulder. Jiraiya. It's time, Tsunade spoke, still glaring at the boy she was restraining with her strength. Jiraiya, how exactly will you seal up his ability to be a shinobi? Kaharu asked as she watched Jiraiya-sama place down 3 scrolls onto the floor and began to form seals. Firstly, I will place a modified version of the Keiyaku Fuin. Hopefully with this any summon he may have or try to acquire will be nullified permanently. Then with a chakra fuin, this will cause his chakra system to reverse on itself and in turn will cause his chakra system to fail on itself and shut down permanently. Jiraiya spoke as he continued to finish the hand seals and pick up the first small scroll and slowly unroll it. And these fuin jutsu will its instruction and creation be revealing to us elders so we may teach other shinobi? Danzo asked, being too cautious to use Shishu's Sharingan to copy the hand seals being made in a room meant for sealing. Jiraiya stopped and looked at the old warhawk. These techniques shall not be disclosed to anyone unless of my choosing. With that, Jiraiya placed his hand on the seal and watched as Tei seal grew and covered the traitor's body. Well, I hope everything was worth it. Sasuke. Jiraiya glared at Sasuke. You turned traitor from the village that raised you just because you threw a fit because you weren't as strong as Naruto. Sasuke locked eyes with Jiraiya, eyes full of pleading and begging to what he assumed to be a confession. That is if the silencing seal was not placed across his mouth. Do it, Jiraiya, after which I can take him down to the genetics lab and get some needed samples. Tsunade spat with venom in her voice. I wonder why she is so hostile, even for the last Uchiha. The killer intent she is putting out. Jiraiya thought to himself as he placed his hand on Sasuke's chest and Tsunade removed her hand. If Jiraiya had been paying attention, he would have seen her give an evil smirk to Sasuke. Kuchio's no Keiyaku Fuin no Jutsu. Jiraiya yelled as the seal covered Sasuke's body. And it was here that Jiraiya's nightly nightmares began. As the moment the seal set in and the smell of burnt blood began to stink out the room, Sasuke's body began to waver and ripple. What? Jiraiya yelled as he quickly thought, a genjutsu. Bringing his hands quickly together, Kai. Releasing the genjutsu and looked on in horror as the body of Sasuke disappeared and was replaced with NN Naruto. Jiraiya screamed, looking on the defeated face of his apprentice just before. Slap. Jiraiya awoke to the sudden pain shooting through his face before something poofed in front of him and covered him in smoke. When it cleared, he saw a Kunoichi glaring at him, her hands flying through hand seals, and sensed a squad of what he assumed to be the Empire's version of Anbu or the Royal Guards. Either way, he knew what to say. I've it up, Jiraiya muttered as he slowly stood up, raising his hands, surrendering himself to the Kunoichi. Jiraiya, Gama Sennin and Spymaster of the Eastern Land Konoha. You are under arrest for trespassing on Imperial land, causing should you resist arrest you will be dealt with by lethal force, Yuuki said, finishing the hand seals and pointing her hands at Jiraiya. Jiraiya, seeing this as an opportunity, offered his hands to the possible royal guard. I surrender on the condition that I may seek an audience with the emperor of this land. Before he could say anything else, he felt a blast of ice-cold Ki and then something very wrong with his body. What? And why the should we? Yuuki growled suddenly, brought her left hand to her throat, gently rubbing it, and to Jiraiya's horror his left hand moved to his throat and slowly began to rub it too. I've got you in my Kai Seigyo no Genkei, and with that she began to slowly walk towards Jiraiya. Jiraiya's eyes widened as he felt his body betray him and moved to the kunoichi, my body. What have you done? Jiraiya was panicking now. Is this a Kekkei Genkei of the West? He watched as the kunoichi proceeded to lift her hands into the air, and clenching them together, Jiraiya copying move for move. You will not take my little adopted brother Konoha scum, Yuuki growled. Then it hit Jiraiya like a ton of bricks. You're that ice maiden that came and got Naruto with that tall white-haired guy. Trying to fight against whatever this jutsu or Kekkei Genkei held him but ultimately failing. Konoha is Naruto's home. You have no reason to keep him away from it. Things have changed. Yuki's steel eyes began to glow as ice slowly formed around her body. The Emperor gave Naruto a home. Something Konoha never did. Yuki screamed as she threw her clenched fists between her legs. Now why did? Oh, she was all Jiraiya said before screaming off the top of his lungs as his fists connected with something hanging between his legs. You caused him so much pain, so much suffering, and basically abandoned him when he needed you the most. Swinging harder, she watched as Jiraiya took blow after blow between his legs. She swung her fists back and forth between her legs. And we had to rescue him a second time. You didn't even try to save him, you just sat there. Yuki screamed, releasing as much killer intent that the arriving Fox members which had surrounded them slowly began to backing off. You never cared to search for him for 10 years and now you're here looking for him. She screamed as her hair began to spike out and ice spikes slowly formed around her and Jiraiya's hands. Raising her arms, she prepared to give a final swing. Yuki, calm down. Naruto wouldn't want this. Yuki snapped around and glared at Yami, who has appeared behind Yuki, her wrists held tightly with his one hand, channeling his own killer intent. Naruto. Give me back my godson. Jiraiya pleaded through the pain he was experiencing, tears rolling down his face. Retracting the ice from both set of hands, Yuki glared evilly at him before raising her fists together above her head and growled, "You're a failure as a sensei and a godfather," after delivering one final swing between her legs, causing Jiraiya to deliver a firm hammer fist into his jewels. Giving one final scream, Jiraiya wanted nothing more than to curl up and cradle his precious jewels. Releasing her control over Jiraiya, as he dropped to the floor, she kicking him in the gut before stormed off next to Yami as Jiraiya slowly began to slip into blissful unconsciousness. Before passing out, he heard the male whisper into his ear, "Consider yourself lucky. Normally she makes men castrate themselves with her Kekkei Genkei. Well, let's get him restrained. The Emperor will want to talk to him." Yami lightly growled as he grabbed the Senin's ankle and dragged him off towards the throne room, Yuki following behind growling like a wild beast. Konohagakure. Tsunade stopped her paperwork and looked out the window. A sudden chill ran through her body. "Jiraiya," she muttered as she looked over her village. Shizune then walked holding an envelope. "Tsunade-sama. You have won the monthly daimyo lottery." Tsunade turned back to Shizune and only muttered, "We are, again." And that's it, folks. Okay, sorry this took a while. I have a habit of working on a chapter, then I'll get a new idea for the next chapter, make notes and such, and then lose my plot line for the chapter I was working on. Sorry. Anyways, I hope to have chapter 5 up within a week, as it will be Naruto, the Emperor confronting Jiraiya, and we shall have a sneak peek as to the hints and tidbits I've put out through this chapter. Oh yes, and Hinata will finally make her debut next chapter. Hinata fans, dance with me. Does the happy dance? Anyways, as always, read, review, favorite and let your friends know. If you have helpful comments about my fictions, please feel free to message me and let me know. If you have only bad things and want to flame and rage, please do so in that fireplace over there, points to unlit fireplace. I need my marshmallows cooked somehow, cheeky smiley face. Naruto looked down on the now restrained Jiraiya. His demon mask safely secured as he now awaited the medics to finish healing Jiraiya from his sudden case of testicle torture by his Nei-chan Yuki. Even though he is a super pervert and women around the nation would praise Nei-chan for what she did. No man deserves that type of torture. Naruto though as he unconsciously tried to cup his own, royal jewels, over his armor. The two medics finished healing Jiraiya's jewels, after a few minutes, bowing and paying their respects to their emperor and the emperor's council members that had now formed around the room as they stood watch and proceeded to quickly retreating from the room. The council members who were seated on a runine table along the wall chatted softly among themselves as they waited for the prisoner to awaken and be questioned by their emperor who was sitting in his simply constructed maple pine throne with his Nei-chan Yuuki and his Oni-san Yami standing guard next to him. That and his personal fox unit hiding in the shadows throughout the room. In terms of how Naruto's throne room looks, could I direct you to watch The Last Samurai and see the room where they meet the Emperor of Japan for the first time? Think of that room slightly bigger. Enough to hold a 50+ people all-you-can-eat banquet laughing face. Jiraiya on the other hand was restrained to the floor of the throne room with suppression seals on the floor and on his body. Jiraiya's arms were tied up on an ox yoke that was chained to the floor and had his hands gloved within iron gauntlets, preventing him from making any hand seals. These items were done at the request of Naruto's fox unit. After only 15 minutes Naruto clenched the arm rests of his chair as he watched Jiraiya finally regain consciousness and the council members all stopped chatting and focused their attention. My balls. Did I try peep on Tsunade again? Jiraiya mumbled as he tried to rub his face, only realizing he was unable to move his arms. Well, this is great, Jiraiya thought as he looked at the ox yoke restraining his arms. This could be bad. Naruto coughed out loudly, gaining Jiraiya's attention. Ah crap. Jiraiya thought as he looked up, seeing who he believed to be the emperor sitting on his throne. Decked out in a suit of samurai armor and wearing a mask that resembled a demon snarling. Hello there, Jiraiya nervously spoke, waving his tied-down hand from the ox yoke before taking on a more serious tone. It is an honor to meet you, Your Highness, and I humbly thank you for giving me an audience. Jiraiya bowed his head and waited for the emperor to respond. Well, here we go, Naruto thought before breathing in and out. He applying chakra to his throat and mouthpiece on his mask, allowing his voice to be distorted. Jiraiya of Konoha, one of the 3 Sannin and known spymaster of the eastern nations. May I be enlightened as to why you have tried to infiltrate my empire? The emperor said to Jiraiya, yelling out the last part and flaring his killer intent directly towards him. If Jiraiya was not secured to the floor, surrounded, he would have retreated to the nearest corner and tried to hide himself. Tell me, Jiraiya, the emperor roared, now standing up and letting Jiraiya watch. To his horror, the emperor's chakra flare visibly reached the ceiling. What chakra? It's near Biju levels, Jiraiya thought as he tried to steel his nerves and spoke. Your Highness, for the past 8 years I have been trying to find my godson, who I believe has entered your lands and may be living under his name or an alias name. I just wish to find him and bring him back home. That is why I entered your empire. I just want my godson back, please. Jiraiya looked up to the emperor, hoping deep down that the emperor could help him and reunite with the godson he neglected for so long and only when to step back into his life, ultimately betray him in his time of need. And what makes you think I shall just hand over a citizen of my empire to you? The emperor spat back at Jiraiya. To his horror, I know of the one you are seeking and he shall not be just handed over to you because of your own guilty conscience. The emperor then began to walk down towards Jiraiya and looked down on him. What I do know is that Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto is now a member of the Imperial Empire and shall not be handed over no matter what man or country demands. Jiraiya looked at the emperor with utmost horror. How did he find out about his heritage? He panicked. How does he know that? Jiraiya pleaded. The emperor turned around and walked back to his throne. Naruto-san found out the day his seal nearly broke and lost control of the Kyuubi no Kitsune he holds within him. Jiraiya paled at this statement, but thanks to his father when the seal was constructed, from what Naruto-san has told me, his father was able to make a failsafe within the seal which held a part of his chakra. A internal cage bunshin, as Naruto-san liked to put it. Sitting down on his throne, the emperor laid his head back against his throne. The chakra of his father was able to help Naruto regain his control and rebuild the Hake no Fuinshiki at the cost of sacrificing all his remaining chakra. Looking back down at Jiraiya, so tell me, why should I return him back to not only you but to Konoha when you removed his ability to summon? Are you going to finish the job and seal all his chakra off? And condemn him to a fate where his very existence is nothing but a bane on everyone's life until the time is called for him to die so that the many can live? Jiraiya was flabbergasted. Minato, you thought that far ahead. Shaking the thoughts out of his head, Jiraiya found the courage to yell, how dare you? You have no idea what I have been through. Jiraiya began to try and stand up, straining the chains so they creaked loudly. I was shocked to do anything at that moment when I found out I sealed and shocked that Tsunade was the one behind it all at the time. It was at that moment a white flash appeared in front of Jiraiya, and pain struck into Jiraiya's gut. You have no idea what we had to go through to save him, you bastard. Yami growled as he removed his fist from Jiraiya's gut and returned to his spot next to the throne. It was here that Jiraiya finally noticed the two guards standing with the Emperor. You're the ones who got Naruto out of the village twice. Having a good look at the giant of a man in front of him and the kunoichi standing next to the throne, Jiraiya spoke with a growl in his voice. Kurakawa Yami, the white-haired assassin, and the Doku Tatsujin * second child to the Kurakawa clan in Kusagakur * renowned for their poison and secret Keki Genkai which no other village knows of yet. Yami growled loudly at this, baring his teeth and his hair spiking. Jiraiya then turning to look at Yuuki Mizuki Aya, the third child and princess of the royal shinobi family in Yuki no Kuni and sole holder of the clan's Keki Genkai, which I can only assume is that Kai Seigyo no Genkai you used on me earlier, both S-ranked and wanted by their families for their abilities. Yuki glared at Jiraiya. She hated being referred to as princess and being reminded of her origins. Yami simply glared back at him. Be glad you're not my poison-testing gerbil, as he flicked his blade in and out of his wrist. The Emperor waved his hand and in an instant, Izunama and Fox jumped down and secured Jiraiya. So tell me then, Jiraiya, what do I not know of Konoha besides them abusing Naruto and my two faithful guards rescuing him? Jiraiya glared at the Emperor. Fine, I'll need a chair or something to sit on, and if it's not too much trouble, can you release my arms please? The Emperor just waved his hand and Jiraiya found the OK yoke instantly removed. Fine, but you must sit on the floor. Grumbling about nothing comfy to sit on, Jiraiya sat down. Okay, where to start? I guess I should start at when your guard's gate crashed the ceiling. Flashback no Jutsu. Konohagakure ceiling room 10 years ago. NN Naruto. Jiraiya screamed in horror. Turning to Tsunade, he finally saw the smirk on her face. Tsunade, what is the meaning of this? He was suddenly met with Tsunade's fist in his face, launching him across the room, his heel catching the scroll laid on the floor and pulling it along with him. That is Godime Hokage to you, Jiraiya. Tsunade sneered back. Now you will finish the sealing of Naruto under my orders. Tsunade then walked over and grabbed Naruto's shoulder. Oh. Tsunade smiled evilly at the look of Naruto's face. Given up hope already? Good. No one is going to save you. Turning to Danzo, she spoke. Under the order of the Godime Hokage, I order you, after we get the needed genetic samples and sterile him, you shall put this brat through Euro emotionless training and turn him into an obedient weapon. Pushing Naruto to the ground, she then started to walk over to Jiraiya, who was slowly getting up. Finally, I have my weapon. Danzo pleasantly thought as he looked over the broken form of Naruto. You shall help me become Hokage of this rotten village and I shall bring it to even greater prestige. Smirking, he tapped his finger against his cane. Things are pleasantly going the way I want. I wonder why Tsunade Hime is acting like this. Oh well, the sooner I can have the Kyuubi brat under my power, the sooner I can take Konoha for myself. Jiraiya pulled himself out of the wall and spat out a tooth from his mouth. Looking up, he saw Tsunade approaching him with a grin. Tsunade, what's gotten into you? Jiraiya groaned as he grabbed the scroll around his foot. Why are you treating Naruto like this? With the scroll rolled back up, he slowly stood up, seeing Tsunade glare at him. It is not your concern to question your leader now. You will finish sealing off his chakra. Jiraiya. Tsunade cracked her knuckles in a clear threat to Jiraiya. Do you have any idea what would happen if I did? Jiraiya pleaded in anger. If I set his chakra system to reverse on itself, it will reverse the Kyuubi's chakra on itself and the Hake no Fuin Shiki could break and release the Kyuubi. Tsunade snorted and waved her pigtail back over her shoulder. I don't care, Jiraiya. You will do as I say and make sure the seal doesn't break. If it does, you can seal a newborn baby with the Kyuubi. Turning around, she began to walk away. Jiraiya was stunned and stood on the spot paralyzed. You're not Tsunade. No way Tsunade would treat Naruto like this, he thought as he clenched the scroll in his hand. Tsunade walked up to Naruto and pulled his hair so he would look her eye to eye, and don't forget, brat. I want my grandfather's pendant back. So you better tell me where it is. Naruto chose to do nothing but look right back at her with his cold dead blue eyes. Tsunade snorted again and threw him onto the floor. Tsunade-sama, you shouldn't treat him so roughly. If he passes away, then the Kyuubi could be released and kill us all, Koharu warned Tsunade, to which she only glared back at her. It was here they finally noticed the ground beginning to shake and a terrifying roar seemed to echo through the room. What on earth? Homura yelled out before the ceiling was smashed in and light flooded the room. Naruto. Yuuki screamed out, standing next to Yami on his personal summon. Kong smashed the building. Yami yelled out as he jumped down and made a beeline for the prone figure of Naruto. Kong roared and slapped his chest as he began to smash the remaining of the building as Yuuki began to launch Suiryuden no Jutsu at random to the people in the room and covering Yami's advancement to Naruto. Danzo's one eye widened. That's the legendary Yama no Suru * summon. The other elders paled. I thought Konoha held the only true Suru contract. Homura yelled out as he, along with Koharu and Danzo, made their way to the exit. Nevertheless, once the intruders are defeated, we will take their contracts to strengthen Konoha, Danzo thought as he retreated to alert his Nei unit. Tsunade was furious. How did you get in my village again? She screamed as she smashed her way through a Suiryuden and charged at Yami, who in the confusion of the crumbling building and Yuki's jutsus had finally managed to reach Naruto. Yami smirked as he let his hair coil around Naruto as he gave the Hokage a creepy smile. Simple, I let Kong knock on the front gate. Tsunade screamed as she launched a chakra-charged super punch at the white-haired intruder. Die! She screamed. Tsunade could only to watch in horror as the world went into slow motion as Yami made the slightest move to his side, completely dodging her fist. Gotta be quicker than that, Obeken Yami teased as he spun around, jumping away and quickly began to running up the wall and onto Kong's arm. Kong, let's get out of here. Kong replied with an alrighty roar. Swiping his massive paw, he sent Tsunade into the opposite wall. Turning around, Kong began to run through the village, towards the front gate that he knocked open. The village was in a state of panic as Kong began to run through the village. Various Konoha shinobi were casting what jutsus they could, only to see nothing seemed to affect the summon at all. Letting out a bellowing roar, Kong charged down the main street, nearly there. Hang on. Yami tried to yell over Kong as he charged down the main street towards the gate. Kakashi suddenly charged from an alleyway. Reikiri. He yelled as he managed to thrust his jutsu into Kong's left thigh. Give back, Naruto. Kakashi yelled as he jumped up onto Kong's back and charged up. Blasted human. Kong roared as he hopped on his right leg. Next hit will cause me to return, Yami. Kong roared as he started to continue to the gate a bit slower. Yami started to flip through seals. Ninpu. Kanashibari Dokugiri no Jutsu. Breathing in, Yami exhales a large cloud of light purple mist engulfing Kakashi, catching him by surprise. Shit. Kakashi tried to quickly Kawarimi away but inhaled a small amount of the poison as he replaced himself with a trash can. Oh Kami. Kakashi groaned as he slumped against a wall. What is this poison? Kakashi thought to himself as he tried to regain control of his body. Panting, Yami clings to Kong's neck. Kong, pants, we gotta get out. Pants heavily. Of here, pants, I am running low. Kong replied with a growl and began to charge at the now broken open gate. Yuuki looked back at the now crowded street of shinobi. Lightly growling, she pulls out a storage seal and with a chakra-covered foot, slams her foot down on it as she releases her jutsu, Sweden. Bakusui Shoha no Jutsu, releasing the water sealed in the scroll and blasting the wave of water down the street. That should keep them off us for a moment, she yelled as wrapped her arms around Yami's hair, holding onto Naruto's hidden body and around Yami's arm. Kong slowed down as he slowly moved over the broken gates, minding his left leg when all three of them heard, Mokuten, Mokusei Kei's no Jutsu. Kong roared in pain as wooden beams wrapped around Kong's injured leg. Release your captive and surrender yourselves or you will all be executed, a voice commanded. Kong turned and looked down to see emerging from the ground an Anbu with a cat-like mask. One hand seemed to be embedded in a beam of wood while the other held onto his sheathed shakudo. Kong roared, "You dare try and restrain me? You shall taste my fury," lifting his very muscular arms high in the air and began to channel a very large amount of chakra into them, Doden, Kozo Kutaku no Jutsu, and slammed his arms into the ground. A few seconds later a massive earthquake rocked throughout Konoha, causing many of the damaged buildings from Kong's charge and Yuki's Bakusui Shoha no Jutsu, and more shockingly to those who watched, the four cage heads on the cliff all fractured. During the earthquake the cat-faced Anbu was unable to maintain his control of the jutsu and keep his balance as the summon proceeded to break the wooden binds and run off away from Konoha. And throughout all this Jiraiya sat on top of the cage cliff, unable to comprehend what has happened in Konoha. Flashback no Jutsu Kai. The council members and the emperor watched in silence as Jiraiya told the story. Yuki and Yami however were unimpressed. "So this tells how Tsunade is such a bitch, hey?" Yuki said unimpressed. Now Yuki-sama, a elderly civilian, spoke up. "There may be a reason as to why Jiraiya-sama is telling us this story." Jiraiya nodded in acknowledgement. "Yes, it was after I was reversed summoned to Myobokuzen and had to explain what happened to Ogama Sennin and the Korogamas that we decided to dig a bit deeper into what Tsunade was doing. And through my spy network I discovered the cause and confront Tsunade in Sennin Moto." Flashback no Jutsu again. Konoha Council Room 2 days after Naruto's kidnapping. Tsunade was raging in the council chamber. No one dared to interrupt her as she ranted on and had smashed the desk in front of her. How was it that two **ing outsiders were able to infiltrate Konoha not once but twice in a few days? What do I pay you **ing shinobi and kunoichi who are on gate and guard duty? Tell me, come on." The council was amazed at the aggressiveness of the Hokage, that and the bleeping that seemed to appear out of nowhere. "Hokage-sama," Koharu cautiously spoke, "you need not worry too much. Outmost skilled Oinen Butai are tracking them down as we speak." Taking a drink from the glass in front her. "What we should be asking is how we are going to keep this quiet from not only foreign powers but from our own daimyo as well." Tsunade gave Koharu a dark look but snorted in agreement. "If worst comes to worst we shall have the Yamanaka clan fix his memory to our benefit." The shinobi side of the council gasped in horror. Rising from his seat Shikaku spoke, "Hokage-sama, I think I speak on behalf of everyone here by saying, are you out of your mind?" Yelling out the last part as he slammed his hands on the table, "What you even suggested is treason." Tsunade just snorted, "Is that right, Nara-san?" Suon spoke in a very dark tone. Before anyone could answer or intervene, Jiraiya shunshin into the room with the Korogama's ma and pa on his shoulders. "Jiraiya, what is the?" was all Homura could say before Jiraiya flooded the room with his killer intent and natural chakra. The civilians retreated to the far wall in sheer terror while the shinobi councilmen stood up from their chairs and stepped PD back. "Jiraiya, stand the down. And explain yourself." Tsunade screamed as she lunged at Jiraiya, only to be found in a throat-tight grip. "You are not Suond." Jiraiya spoke, croaked as he began to form a Rasengan in his opposite hand. "You somehow have taken control of her and I will free her by my hand." Bringing his hand just in front of her face, the Rasengan blowing her hair away from her horror-filled face. "Goodbye, Tsunade Heim," Jiraiya softly spoke as he brought his hand back ready to slam it into her face, with all the council members and elders watching in horror. "Fine then, I'll take your body." Tsunade screeched. Opening her mouth, a blood-covered transparent black snake-like creature emerged and lunged at Jiraiya. Only to be stopped by Pa's tongue. I got it, Jiraiya-chan, Pa croaked as he tightened his tongue around, with Ma joining in and wrapping her tongue around the creature. Shizune, get in here now. Jiraiya yelled as he hurried over to the fallen form of Tsunade. Oh Kami-sama, I am sorry, Tsunade muttered, blood seeping from her mouth before she passed out. Flashback no jutsu ended. The whole chamber was silent as Jiraiya spoke. It was discovered through my spy network Orochimaru had been experimenting on a parasitic worm and snakes, somehow embedding a chakra we have never experienced before. Popping his back he continued, the parasitic snake was believed to be snuck into Konoha through Tsunade's favorite sake dealer. Once she had a drink, this parasite grew inside Tsunade until it was able to somehow attach itself to her spine and was able to control her to a degree. Jiraiya looked up at the Emperor, who had now crushed the arm rests in his hands. I do have an autopsy scroll with me if you want to see the report yourself. Jiraiya proceeded to remove a scroll and present it, to which a Fox member quickly took it and handed it to the Emperor. The Emperor looked at the scroll in hand for a moment. Everyone was silent. We shall continue this trial tomorrow, and with that he stood up and walked out of the room. It seems the Emperor has moved to his private study to now make sense of what you have told us, Jiraiya-sama, the civilian council member spoke. In the meantime, I am afraid you will have to remain in custody with Fox until the Emperor calls for you again. Jiraiya nodded sadly but still asked, can I see Naruto please? It was Fox who spoke, only if the Emperor allows it, and with that Fox shunted Jiraiya away to the Imperial Palace's dungeon. After the council members had left the throne room and Yuuki and Yami were the only ones left, they sealed the room up and made their way over to Naruto's private study. Upon entering, they found him slumped over his desk, his mask and kabuto dropped on the floor, carelessly reading the scroll given to him by Jiraiya. Hey Chibi, everything okay? Yami asked as he placed his hand on Naruto's shoulder. Naruto turned and looked at both of his older sibling, tears running down his face, and choked out, I don't know what to do, guys. The Empire shows its might to the east. Imperial Palace's dungeons. Jiraiya was brought in personally, guided by his two Fox guards down to the palace's dungeon, where after a few minutes of assisted walking they finally reached his cell. Waiting by the cell door was two royal guards, and the moment Jiraiya was in front of the doors, a guard slapped a tag onto his chest. Jiraiya could only watch as the tag's ink began to spread across his clothes before sinking in and sealing itself onto his body. He was informed that dinner would be served in a couple hours before the guards locked up left him alone to his own thoughts. Jiraiya was not happy as he began looking around his prison cell. Jiraiya noted the plain bed, chair, table, which were all bolted and sealed to the floor. The basic bathroom necessities were present, though there would be no privacy as he suspected. He sat down on the chair and summarized that this type of cell would be used for those deemed important but not VIP important. Leaning forward and resting his elbows on the desk, he brought his hands up to support his face and began to reflect on his plan. He had hoped that he could sneak into the Empire just like he did in the other hidden villages, retrieve his lost godson and bring him back home to not only make up for the time he should have being there for him and to also let him resign the Toad contract, but to also show the rest of the shinobi world and their former allies that they brought him back home and hoped to get some of their former allies back on their side. But that didn't happen. In fact, everything went to shit the moment he stepped into the village and felt the security seal on the main entrance go off, and he had to make a break for it before the guards could find him. But now he was looking at the situation he was left in now. Not only was he, the great Sanin, discovered and caught alive, but now had all his chakra sealed up and was being held prisoner in a foreign country which he entered illegally. Such actions could result in an act of war, a war he knew Konoha would never win. Jiraiya slowly began to nod off to sleep, resting against his arms on the desk, remembered how the most powerful hidden village was turned into the weakest in a matter of months. Jiraiya's mindscape flashback. When the information of what transpired in Konoha hit the other elemental nations, from traveling traders and from reports from their own spies within. that Tsunade had openly punished and demeaned a still recovering shinobi in public. The civilian council openly praised the Hokage in her punishing actions to said shinobi, but also removed the third's law and revealed that not only was he in fact the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, but also let slip of the fate the loyal shinobi once he was recovered from both his wounds and his kidnappers. Furthermore were the actions again of the last loyal Uchiha. The civilian council let it be known that the cursed seal on Sasuke left by the traitor Sanin Orochimaru brainwashed him and caused him to defect, and claimed that he broke free of the brainwashing and tried to return back to Konoha only to be stopped by the evil demon child and beaten to an inch of his life. Though the medical files of Uchiha Sasuke were edited by the civilian council to show all the injuries sustained by the demon child, no report be admission or medical was shown of the entire recovery team, and specifically all of Uzumaki Naruto's medical report for the mission was mysteriously lost in a fire accident in the archives. The outcry of the nations was immediate, as each major nation made their own decree on the now missing shinobi, and the very valuable missing Jinchuriki. The Yondaime Reikage openly stated to his own forces that should the two kidnappers known only at the time as Yami and Yuuki and the Jinchuriki Naruto be seen by any of his shinobi forces, they were to grant all three immediate political and shinobi protection and permission to enter Kaminari no Kuni and be granted asylum with the option to join their village Kumogakure and to give Naruto assistance in training with his Biju. Even as going as far as secretly allowing his own Jinchuriki Yugito ni and the Reikage's own adopted brother Killer B out on search parties. Though it should be noted that after 3 search party attempts that Killer B was given an iron claw to the head and a full thrashing followed by a lariat by his older adopted brother A as he snuck off during one search to attend a rap concert in a neighboring town and was henceforth never allowed to leave the village again. Iwagakure simply chose to hunt them down and collect the bounty from them, as a very large bounty had being offered on Uzumaki Naruto being captured alive by an anonymous client. Though when the two Iwa Jinchuriki living in seclusion Roshi and Han were informed, they took off on their own to try find a wayward brother, and look throughout the Tsuchi no Kuni and have since not being seen or heard of. Kurigakure also took the same approach as Kumogakure and offered asylum to the three should they ever need assistance or sanctuary. Though with the current mess of things in their own village by the previous actions of the controlled Yondaime Mizukage Yagura, and the loss of the Sanbai in a failed attempt by the remaining loyal forces of Yagura by sealing the Sanbai into captured Konoha Kunoichi Rin and having her lose control in her home village but being unable to prevent her from killing herself by her teammate Kakashi when an opportunity presented itself. Their second Jinchuriki Udakadiya is still considered Miya in Mizu no Kuni. The new Godime Mizukage Terumi Mei took the reconstruction and unification of her village and surrounding areas, including the search for their own missing Jinchuriki and locating the site of the Sanbai's resurrection as a more pressing concern than looking for 3 missing shinobis for the time being. Sunagakure was a different matter altogether. Sabaku no Gara, the Jinchuriki of the Aikibi Shukaku, who had learned of what happened to his very first friend upon arriving back to his village after assisting in the recovery of Uchiha Sasuke, simply walked out of the Casecage building and into the desert. That night the whole village awoke to the enraged scream, roaring of not only the Aikibi Shukaku but of also Gara. Konoha had the unfortunate news told to them that Gara was going to be the Godime Casecage, and sure enough, when he was deemed old enough and had the support of the village, he became the Godime Casecage, and his first act as Casecage was to abolish the alliance treaty between them and only left a non-aggressive treaty stating that while they were seen as friendlies, Suna would do nothing in aiding or defending Konoha in any matter. Konoha's civilian council secretly sent spokesman after spokesman trying to gain favor of the populace of Suna to denounce their demon cage and to install a more respectable cage, though every month a special parcel came from Suna to the civilian council that was the size of a matchbox. Even worse though, when Konoha released the information to each major hidden village that their Hokage was under the influence of a foreign entity, Suna refused to answer any attempts of renegotiating of their treaty. The minor villages and lands such as Takigakure, Yuki, Haru no Kuni, Cha no Kuni, Tori no Kuni and specifically Nami no Kuni were extremely displeased with how Naruto was treated and subsequently choose to not renew their treaties and in some cases were forbidden to even enter their lands under the threat of death as Daimyo Kazuhana Koyuki had issued, along with the finding and protection of Uzumaki Naruto and his saviors. What could be noted is that upon Takigakure hearing the news of the occurrences in Konoha, their own Jinchuriki Fuho had the Nanabai disappeared a few months later. Only a few in the village missed her and tried to attempt a search and rescue. The merchant and banking guilds throughout the civilian and shinobi nation had blacklisted Konoha as chose to either direct their own wares and businesses opportunities offers to other lands at a cheaper price, refuse products, services from Konoha or choosing to continue to deal with Konoha at double to triple the rate. This caused not only Konoha's economy to drop very fast but also alerted the Hino Kuni daimyo as he lost not only economically but also lost his political standing with the other daimyo. Something that he made quite clear on his visit to Konohagakure no Sato. Flashback 3 months after Naruto's kidnapping. The entire village council, shinobi, civilian, elder and a still recovering Tsunade with Shizune faithfully at her side, along with Jiraiya and a Neko masked Anbu were all sitting silently as the daimyo looked over each member, his fan covering his face as his samurai guards surrounded the table and each one of them had a hand on their katana sheaths as the Shugonen Junichi asterisk stood at the ready close to their daimyo. So can anyone tell me why I have not only lost my standing with the other daimyo but lost over 60% of revenue to Hino Kuni? The daimyo calmly but furiously asked. He looked over everyone. But before Tsunade or the elders could speak, a female civilian council member stood up and beat them to it. Daimyo-sama, the only person at fault here is the demon child Uzumaki Naruto. All the shinobi in the room turned their gaze to her and though they couldn't emit their ki to her for fear of retaliation against the daimyo's guards, the look in their eyes said all they needed to say. The demon child has gone and brainwashed them all with deceit and lies about our proud and wonderful village and nation. Brushing her pink hair from her asterisk cough billboard cough asterisk brow she gave the daimyo a sweet smile. The only way we can recover from this is to find and kill the demon child. Then all he has done will simply wash away and we shall be seen as a wonderful loving place again. The civilian side of the council broke into applause while everyone else in the room remained silent. It was a tense minute while everyone watched the daimyo's face go from a healthy color to a rage-filled red. You stupid sow. He roared at the stunned council members, causing said standing member to fall onto her chair. Uzumaki Naruto had nothing to do with it and you know it. Stomping over to the now seated and shaking council woman, he slammed his hands down onto the table. I have done a very thorough investigation with my own Shugonen Junichi and the results were very unsatisfactory. Haruno Sayuri. The daimyo's face now blood red as his veins started to show and truly intimidated Sayuri. Daimyo-sama, Tsunade said weakly, Shizune at her side helping her stand and gently healing her with the Shozen Justu asterisk. Any and all fault should fall onto me. Pushing Shizune aside she tried to bow before him, having to rest her hands against the table to do so. If I had only being more careful. Senju Tsunade Haim. You have no right to apologize for all the actions that have taken place, waving his hand to let Tsunade sit down and to let Shizune return to healing Tsunade. Your unfortunate incident with that snake thing certainly did cause a lot of problems, but I cannot blame you for the action that has being taken. Though the reports on the civilian council speak for itself, waving his hand a member of the Shugonen Junichi passed out several folders to the shinobi council and elders. The sounds of sharp inhales and gasps rang through the shinobi side as the majority of civilian council began to sweat. Everything that they have done have caused untold damage to not only Konoha but to Hino Kuni as well for years to come. Inoichi spoke out, looking up at the council as he slammed down the report he had read. About how the civilian council was raiding and seizing complete warehouses full of goods and reselling it through their own trusted stores, while siphoning off a good cut of the profits to several hidden accounts while some of the money just simply disappeared. Hiyashi Hyuga then spoke. Changes in the education system for shinobi training to allow more civilian families easier access to the ranks by reducing the requirements needed to join. encouraging more emphasis on the Uchiha clan and only minor details on the clans and the abolishment of all topics and information on the cousin clan of the Senjus, the Uzumaki clan. This is a blatant insult to not only all the clans of the village but to the Uzumaki clan. Who helped found out village and made the ultimate sacrifice during the Third Shinobi War. As he had his Byakugan activated and was just staring right at the civilian council. Danzo was swearing his head off at the civilian council in his head, damn them stupid fools. Now not only have they possibly shown evidence of my root program but they have caused them now to not only look into my and the elders' attempts to make the Uzumaki clan disappear as they should have but they have also lost my weapon. How can I take this to my advantage? He thought of using Shisu's Sharingan to his advantage but the stupid old fool's sudden change from anger to calm would raise questions. But before Danzo could speak, Shikaku stood up and beat him to it. Not only that, Hiyashi, it looks like lowering the academy standards was also done so that more civilian families that has closer ties to important sections of the village or those close to the council members who offered shares and possible business opportunity exclusive to them only, tossing the files to the floor. And the worst is not only trying to force the shinobi banks to surrender the accounts of Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina but also employing any and all available seal breakers in secret to try access the Namikaze compound. Quote. He screamed. If Danzo was pissed, he was furiously pissed off now. They left a paper trail. He roared in his head as he gave the civilian side of the council a death glare. I have been trying to get inside that compound and claim all the Yondaime's jutsus and they may have now blown it. He thought bitterly. The room suddenly went dead silent as Jiraiya started to laugh out loud and gain everyone's attention. Seriously? You tried to hire any seal master to break my students' seals? How stupid can you be? Laughing, he moved closer to the table and laid the folder he was reading onto the desk and gave the entire room a serious glare. You do know the seals are blood-locked and any attempt to break them will cause the entire sealed perimeter to collapse on itself and cease to exist. And furthermore, how dare you try and access their bank accounts? They have been set up for a reason. And to be left out of your greedy hands, with that. It was then that Haruno Sayuri gained enough courage to speak again. We have to get access to them. Our beloved Yondaime Hokage left all his finances behind when he saved us from the Kyuubi. With those funds we could expand and grow this village to a greater level of prestige. Danzo was only thinking how the finances of the late Yondaime could be used to expand and empower his own route, while the pink-haired howler monkey kept screaming. And that horrible monster of a Kunoichi Uzumaki Kushina was rumored to be the heir of Uzushio-gakur. And has had the entire village's funds to herself. But because of the stupid shinobi banks, both accounts that now sits unused and untouched, collecting interest from the banks and the investments throughout not only Konoha but throughout Hai no Kuni they made together. Jiraiya thought to himself as she ranted and raved. Is she really that stupid to not be able to connect the dots and see that both Minato and Kushina were doing all the investments together? Let alone they were dating each other. Must be a fangirl thing. Meanwhile at the Konoha hospital, Sakura, who was fawning over the currently unconscious Sasuke, sneezed. Oh, Sasuke-kun must be dreaming about me, she squealed to herself as she watched said person sleep. Back to the council room. It was then the representative for both the shinobi and civilian banks, who had traveled from with the daimyo, stood up. As it has been said to you many times, council member, the accounts of the deceased Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina are to be sealed until their heir comes to claim them. Haruno Sayuri went to scream in objection, but a loud cough from the daimyo silenced her instantly. If the accounts in question have not been claimed in the span of 30 years, then the funds inside them will be transferred to the Hokage's Village Trust Fund, where the leader will decide where the funding will go as stipulated in our terms and conditions upon signing the contract to open an account in this land. Sitting back down and ignoring the death glare from Haruno Sayuri. The room went dead silent for a moment until Danzo spoke. So the compound, the treasured items and finances of our beloved Yondaime Hokage are lost forever. Jiraiya gave the old war hawk a steady glare. Oh no, they aren't lost, they are simply sealed away until the day that the Yondaime's son should return. But thanks to you idiots, I doubt. Jiraiya. The two elders Kaharu and Homaru screamed out together, "That is a triple S ranked secret and no one must know." This intrigued everyone's interest, especially Danzo and the daimyo. Also young Minato-sama and Kushina-chan did have a child. The daimyo asked hopeful as he was informed the dreaded night that he and his pregnant wife had died the night of the Kyuubi's attack. The entire council room was shocked into silence, even the howling cough pink monkey cough Haruno Sayuri, but that pleasure was only short-lived. "He choose another woman over me," she screamed, and now was trying to plan how to get her daughter to fawn all over his legacy. "I will get the life I deserve." Jiraiya looked directly at the daimyo, showing the lonely sadly in his eyes only to him. "Yes, sire, and it's my unfortunate responsibility that thanks to them," pointing to the civilian council and ignoring the pleas and demands of Kaharu and Homaru, "that Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto is now no longer in this village." And what seemed to be for a second time, the entire council room was silenced. Haruno Sayuri was doing a wonderful impression of a goldfish out of water opening and closing her mouth. "This is impossible," a rather fat civilian called out. "If we know Yondaime-sama had left a child, we would have made sure that everything the child wanted was given to him." Finally a new voice rang out through the room. Aburame Shibi, who for the first time in the knowledge of the current council members stood up and spoke. "Just like the logical choice you have done with Uchiha Sasuke." Realization hit in instantly for the shinobi and took a bit longer for the civilian council to not understand, so Aburame Shibi explained. If young Uzumaki-san had in fact being told of his heritage and addressed as Namikaze-sama, raising his finger at the civilian side, logic would dictate that you all would have done anything within your power to not only win favor with him but to try and ensure that your own personal goals were met before his own. And highly likely to arrange marriage contracts with civilian women to ensure you could hold on to his power and wealth. The civilian council side snorted in disagreement, but for all the women and male members who had daughters were now trying to figure out how to convince their children or themselves to seduce and rob Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto of everything that he was to receive. Turning his finger to the three elders, "You three would have acted the same way as you have to young Uchiha-san, need I say anything more logical?" To which the two elders Kaharu and Homaru turned their heads in shame for such blatant dishonor they felt from treating their hero's child. Danzo kept a neutral face and was only thinking how to acquire Konoha's weapon, and with the power of both Uzumaki Kushina's Fuinjutsu knowledge and the Yondaime's personal technique the Hiraishin no Jutsu to empower his root forces and take control of not only Konoha but the rest of the shinobi villages under his rule forever. Shibi then turned to the shinobi council, "And logic would dictate that though your clan and my own clan would have done everything in our powers to protect and nurture young Naruto as he grew, and our clan councils would all try find a way to be in Uzumaki-san's good favor, and as the civilian council would have logically thought of to approach Uzumaki-san's legal guardians or Uzumaki-san directly himself as he got older to offer marriage contracts." But to everyone's horror he turned his finger to the daimyo, "And logic would see that you would have tried to strip young Uzumaki-san of all his political power or found a way to incorporate them into your own. Being the last known Uzumaki alive and hence would have inherited not only his father's status but also his mother's political status. Logic dictates this quite clearly, and for my dear friend to decree what he did on the day he died was to ensure young Uzumaki-san would grow up as a normal boy, but we can see how illogically the civilian council thought and acted." Everyone in the room was dead silent, and Inuzuka Sume could have sworn she heard a mouse fart with her enhanced hearing. The shinobi council bar the Aburame clan, the Hyuga clan and the Kurama clan all bowed their heads in disrespect, where Sume hit the desk with her fist also. The civilian council and the elders were trying to speak, but while some tried to, others had bowed their own heads in shame. The daimyo was horrified at the logical conclusion that the Aburame put against him should the orphaned child's status be known and wanted to refute him. But knew that it was true and chose to remain silent. After Aburame Shibi had sat down, the room enjoying its rare and few moments of peaceful quietness for the third time, before Inuzuka Sume got up and began punching the wall while crying her eyes out and blabbering an apology to someone, though no one could catch the name as it was too illegible under the crying and yelling. To which Shizune made a shadow clone and a hidden purpled hair Anbu appeared to calm down the distraught woman. Then the reaction Shibi had been expecting came. Logically he told his hive to block his ears so he could block out most of the noise out before he sat down. After a couple hours of long arguments, mainly a small section of the civilian council claiming innocence, to the fact that they had deliberately sabotaged and abused the son of the greatest hero of their village while the majority claimed that it was a joke and that Naruto was nothing but a demon. Surprisingly, the shinobi side was begging to send out all available clan members to aid in the search of Naruto, to find and return him so that they may try to regain their honor again for failing the fallen Yondaime Hokage. It was the daimyo who stood up and slammed his hand onto the table. Konoha will suffer greatly for this travesty. And with that turned around and left with his guards and other dignitaries. Tsunade, who had been silent mostly due to her recovering injury, spoke. Everything that has happened in this council room will be regarded as a triple S rank secret. Should anyone reveals what happened in here to anyone outside, there will be no trial, no court case, nothing. I will simply have you killed where you stand. Status B, and with that she got up and walked away. Slowly one by one the council members left and returned to their homes or clans. Some to inform them the importance of finding and returning Uzumaki Naruto back home to Konoha, where other civilian members got together and tried to plan how to force the demon child to remain in Konoha long enough so that they may have enough time to raid the Yondaime and his wife's wealth and power, and to ensure that the demon brat's legacy runs solely through their family only. It was until Tsunade returned to the Hokage private living quarters in the Hokage Tower with Shizune that she dropped to the bed and broke down crying. Shizune too had tears running down her face as she tried to keep up with healing Tsunade. While Jiraiya stood outside the door of said room, his own tears running down his cheeks as he swore on his life, I will find you and bring you home, Naruto. Flashback ends. Jiraiya was brought back to reality as the guard banged against the prison's door bars and pushed forward a tray of food onto the shelf on the door. Eat it before it gets cold and please keep any noise to a minimum, before walking away. Jiraiya cautiously approached and took the food and slowly began to eat it, tasting for any poisons or any drugs in it. Once he was sure that it was safe, he consumed it all. Smirking after he ate, he let out a loud belch to annoy the guards before proceeding to go to bed and sleep. Later that night, Jiraiya was standing up looking into the mirror and what light that was being shined from the weak light bulb as he tried to inspect the seal on his chest that wrapped around his body. Blasted seal, Jiraiya complained as he tried to access his chakra but could feel the seal instantly drain Jiraiya of it and give a burning sensation through his chest. Deciding he had enough information about its design and structure, he returned to the chair and desk and with the paper and pencil provided he began to draw a rough sketch of what he could see of the seal. It's defiantly an Uzumaki design. But it is of a different construct, but how did they get it? Jiraiya pondered as he slowly traced the pencil over the spiral he had drawn on the paper. Standing up and moving to the cell's edge and slightly peeking his head out, he found the guards down the end playing a card game. Perfect. Jiraiya smirked as he moved to the back corner of his cell. Well, here goes nothing. Gulping and forming the ram symbol, Jiraiya poked his fingers into his mouth and pushed against. Kai. He muttered as he could feel the seal in the back of his mouth release a small amount of chakra, just enough for the seal in his throat to activate before the main seal sucked it away. Here it was all Jiraiya thought before he vomited up a small toad in a black cloak. Before the toad could even make a sound, Jiraiya already had his hand around the toad's mouth. I'm sorry, Fukasaku-sama, but I need you to listen and notice the area we are in, to which the small toad nodded as Jiraiya let go of his mouth. Jiraiya-chan, Fukasaku whispered, it seems to me that you were captured, no? To which Jiraiya could only shamefully nod. I see, the toad pondered as he hopped down from the table onto the floor. Well, guess I'll have to save the day once again. This time I hope it's not from a horde of angry women, or for that matter a village full of women you have angered, Fukasaku croaked as quietly and as humorously as he could. I assure you that it is not the case. Jiraiya spoke softly. He slowly looked around to ensure he was still alone, though I am a bit of a pickle, pointing to his chest, so Fukasaku, my entire chakra network has being sealed off and I don't have a clue how to unseal it nor how to combat it. Fukasaku squinted as he tried to view the seal in the poor light. I can't do anything about that, sorry Jiraiya-chan. Clapping his hands together he closed his eyes. Fukasaku then proceeded to hop towards the jail door. I will try and get the key to your cell door. For some reason I am unable to reverse summon, perhaps a seal within this prison. Just as Fukasaku was about to jump out of the cell, a cold voice rang out, you are not going anywhere. Jiraiya froze as he heard a voice he hadn't heard in a long time. Hello Kyufu. Stepping out of the shadows in the corridor, Jiraiya moved to the cell's door and tried to stick his head out, but the seal on his chest reacted to this action and caused him to pull it back in. Something Fukasaku took notice of. Jiraiya could only stare as he saw the figure finally step out into the available light, but Jiraiya knew in an instant who it was. Naruto. Both Fukasaku and Jiraiya spoke softly. Konoha 2 week after Jiraiya's capture. Tsunade was extremely worried. Jiraiya had missed his call-in message a week ago and now feared she had lost someone else dear to her heart. You stupid oaf, you better be just checking in late. I don't know what to do if you were gone too, she muttered to herself as she finished filling out paperwork. Looking over the village she saw the state it was in now. Where over 10 years ago when she took office, the village was full of life and prosperity, now the village was a former shadow of itself. A few days after the meeting with the daimyo, a civilian council member, one Hidemo Shikunji who was in charge of the market district, had gone against what Tsunade had ordered and told his little market council the truth of the meeting, and with that his fate was sealed. Once the market council had started to blab to the populace, they were all rounded up by the Anbu, but it was too late. It was discovered by Ibiki through his persuasive methods with a few of his visitors, how they learnt the secrets of the SSS rank meeting through Hidemo and his personal market council. Needless to say, they were all brought before Tsunade so she could go through with her promise and personally delivered the punishing blow. But the damage done by them was irreversible. The truth of Uzumaki's lineage spread like wildfire and the typical reaction came. Just under half of the civilian populace outright denied the truth and demanded the immediate death should the demon ever return to the village. The other half, mainly the shinobi forces, were horrified that they had not only dishonored their beloved Yondaime Hokage, but they had allowed the civilians to abuse and torture their hero's only child. The final quarter of civilians and a small section of the shinobi forces could not live with the shame of what they did or allowed to happen to their hero's chid and simply chose to end their life. Tsunade was greatly saddened by this loss of unnecessary life, but was irrelevant as once the other elemental nations found out it was as her Tokubetsu Jonin Mitarashi Anko put it, Konoha has being hit by a shitstorm, and furthermore Konoha lost its position among the other nations. The fire daimyo also lost his standing among the other daimyos and in retaliation taxed Konoha heavily. The civilian council were outraged about the additional taxes imposed on them, as it was their fault for how Naruto was treated through the years. Though Tsunade couldn't say it, she loved the reaction of the civilian council and the additional taxes owed by them. Though it was surprising to find some members of the civilian had used funds from accounts that were unknown to even those within Hi-no Kuni's taxation department, so once those who had hidden accounts outside Hi-no Kuni and were evading taxation were caught, were taxed even further. Though some managed to cover their tracks and not get caught. At Konoha's Kekai Han, nothing interesting was happening today, as Katetsu Hagane and Izumo Kamizuki and the rest of the Interception Division were currently playing cards. So boring. Katetsu sighed as he dropped 2 cards. Things were much more interesting when Naruto used to pull his pranks. The entire Interception team let out a chuckle as they all started to reflect on the orange-clad shinobi's pranks during his academy years. So think we will ever find him again? A branch Hyuga teammate asked as he dropped 3 cards. It would do great to see Lady Hinata smile again like the old days. It was no secret that Hyuga Hinata had a crush on the young Jinchuriki Uzumaki Naruto. When the village praised and thanked Kami that he was gone, Hinata fell into a depression until after a clan meeting a year after her attitude changed after rumors she murdered an elder in cold blood after he bad-mouthed Naruto and the young heiress's love and adoration of him. And ever since that day, the young heiress had turned from the sweet, kind-hearted girl to a cold and generally uncaring Hyuga princess and soon-to-be clan head. Only her team and those who treated Naruto as a real person she showed emotion. Something that the Hyuga's branch members truly missed and wished to return. Okay ladies, shall we finish this game? Azumo smirked as he looked over his cards. I'm feeling lucky today, he sang as everyone prepared to show their cards. Code Red, I repeat, Code Red, a detection member screamed, alerting the interception team, who immediately jumped from their desk to the room. As the interception team looked up to the floating ball of water resembling the seal around Konoha, they saw 4 spikes slowly begin to push into the water sensor sphere. 4 subjects approaching the village, 2 of them rank Jonin level. 1 Cage, and the other is Biju leveled. Screamed the robbed man. Could Naruto have returned? Everyone in the interception team thought. Where are they headed? The Hyuga branch member asked as he activated his Byakugan to try and locate them himself. Targets are approaching the main gate. The robbed detection member seemed to ask himself. Estimated time of arrival, 25 minutes. Why are they taking so long? We better inform Hokage-sama, Kotetsu said as he tapped Azumo's shoulder, and both made a break for the Hokage Tower while the other members split off and headed to the Anbu HQ to acquire reinforcements to follow and prepare for any situation. Hokage office. Tsunade was smiling as she finally finished signing off the final paperwork and had retrieved a clear glass bottle from between her cleavage. Personally bottled sake after a long day of work. Tsunade smiled as she slowly began to drink from it. Hokage-sama. Azumo screamed as he burst through the door, only to receive an empty bottle to the head. Tsunade-sama, I did warn him, Shizune said as she and Kotetsu entered the room. Hokage-sama, we have come to report a code red from the Kekai Han. 4 individuals are approaching the village's main gate. Tsunade snorted, and why would that be considered a code red? She asked in disbelief. Azumo, who had gotten up, answered immediately. One of them has Biju level chakra. And with that, Tsunade was up. Could it be Naruto? She screamed as she ran past them and headed out of the building towards the front out of Tye. Just outside Konoha's main gate. It seems that Konoha has being alerted to our position. Walter spoke as he wiped his monocle and put it back on. So what do we do after we hand the scroll over? Asked a tall young man, only wearing a white trench coat with the kanji kyodai and fixing the straps on what appears to be a knuckle duster gauntlet. Simple. We find the strongest fighters in this pathetic village and have some fun. Spoke the taller companion, dressed in a black hakama and keiko gi and was wearing a white coat with the number 11 stitched on its back. But Ken-chan, I want to go to a hot spring and have some chocolate. A small pink-haired girl said as she bonked her fist on top of his head. Calm down Yakiru, we will get you a lot of chocolate, Ken-chan said as Yakiru began to squeal unhappily. Walter smiled at the interaction between Kenpachi and his adopted daughter. Turning his head, he could see Konoha's gates were only a few minutes away, and his eye narrowed at the now large formed group of Konoha's forces now stood at the ready at the gate with what Walter presumed to be the Hokage. This will be quite interesting, Walter said as he adjusted his monocle. Konoha's Pav. Tsunade stood hopeful at the village's main gate, praying to Kami Almighty that it was Naruto and perhaps some friends he made while he was gone and that he was coming home. Hitaki Kakashi stood alongside Tsunade, when he heard from a friend in Anbu that they were being deployed to a Biju-leveled person approaching the main gate with several other high-leveled members. He too hoped that it was Naruto. Out of all the shinobi shamed by their actions, he personally felt like he was the most dishonored. Being Minato's own student, he should have been there for Naruto when he was growing up, but he believed that once he was Naruto's sensei he could take better care of him. But the civilian council and the elders put a stop to that and convinced Kakashi he had to support Uchiha Sasuke and began to neglect not only Naruto but his other student Haruno Sakura, who had become a student under Tsunade for a while. A crowd slowly began to form of both civilian and shinobi, the shinobi because they were informed of the sudden deployment of Anbu, where the civilian were just curious as to why their Hokage and a deployment of shinobi and Anbu at the front gate. The civilian and shinobi clan heads all stood with Tsunade and awaited the arrival of the 4 travelers. Back to normal POV. It was a tense 5 minutes before the four travelers arrived at the front gate and the Konoha group stood silently as the Hokage stepped forward, upset that Naruto wasn't with them but chose to welcome them anyway. Greetings travelers and welcome to Konohagakure. She offered her hand towards the man wearing a suit and a monocle. I thank you for meeting us Hokage-sama, I am Walter C. Dornez. To my left is Kenpachi Zaraki, leader of the 11th Legion and his adopted daughter Yakiru Kusajishi. Kenpachi steps forward with Yakiru sitting on his shoulder, grinning sadistically at Tsunade. He mocks a two-finger salute. Greetings, where Yakiru giggled and waved, hello pretty blonde lady. Tsunade nodded and greeted them back but was slightly confused. The 11th Legion, who in the elemental nations has a legion? Walter then moved his hand to his right, and to my right is the second in command of the Kyodai Eyes Battle Monk Division, known as Second Brother. Second simply waved his hand giving a casual hello. I don't mean to be disrespectful Walter-san, but may I ask why you are here? Tsunade inquired, utterly confused of who they were or why they are here. Oh yes, one moment Hokage-sama. Walter then pulled out a small scroll from his pouch. With both hands he passed it to the Hokage. She could see the intricate wax seal on the scroll and she knew in an instant it couldn't be good. Under the orders of His Imperial Majesty, the Emperor has ordered myself, Kenpachi, Yakiru and Second Brother to personally deliver this message for you from the Emperor himself, and to inform you that the one known in this village as the Gama Sennin, one of the Densetsu no Sanin known as Jiraiya, has been captured and is to be trialed for crimes against our empire. Walter smiled as he handed the scroll over to the shocked Hokage. What for? And what proof do you have? Tsunade asked. Oh Kami, please let the cruel prank and that you're okay Jiraiya, Tsunade was screaming in her head. The crowd gasped in shock. Jiraiya was seen as a legend, not for his ICHA publications but for his ability to sneak into places undetected and being unable to being captured, but to hear that not only had Jiraiya failed but was captured alive. Walter smiled slightly sadistically as he pulled out Jiraiya's forehead protector with the Myobokuzan symbol etched into it and several strands of white hair. Why for the attempted kidnapping of our empire's beloved hero Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto. The confrontation with the West. Konoha Council Meeting Room. It took only a few minutes to relocate the entire council of Konoha and the newly arrived visitors from the front gates of Konoha into the private council chambers. Several Anbu and Junin had to provide crowd control, as some of the civilian and shinobi in the crowd were calling out and demanding that these thieving visitors return their precious Namikaze heir. As the guests entered the Hokage Tower and were being led to the East Tower and asked to wait until the council room was prepared for them, Walter was enjoyed taking his time to view of the many artwork pieces and literature written by past heroes, sages and cages of the village. Second Brother simply chose to kick back and relax while fiddling with his knuckle duster gauntlet as he leaned against the wall. Yakiru was happily sitting on Ken-chan's shoulder devouring a box of chocolate that was given to her by Walter to behave herself until the meeting was over. Kenpachi was having a ball staring straight into the face of the Anbu with his one eye, daring them to challenge him as he leaked a little bit of his ki towards them. The Anbu though were able to stand, found that their bodies were shaking. It was a short 5-minute wait until the council doors opened, and with a breath of relief from the guarding Anbu, that the group was permitted to enter and were seated in the middle of the room. With the shinobi sitting to the right side of them and the civilian and elders sitting on the left. With Tsunade sitting in front of them. Starting off the meeting, Tsunade stood up and gestured with her open arms. As the Godime Hokage Senju Tsunade, I welcome you all to our humble village, and firstly I would like to apologize for the actions of the civilians and some of my own shinobi for their choice of words while we walked here, and bowed respectfully towards the four visitors. And we thank you for allowing us entrance into your village, and do not fret about those comments from the people of your village, Walter replied back with a smile as he and the other three bowed before the Hokage. As the visitors and Tsunade finished bowing and returned to their seat, bar Tsunade and Walter, the two elders Homura and Kaharu stood up. Kaharu tapped her hand onto the desk and began to speak. We wish to know why has one of our beloved and strongest shinobis now imprisoned in your lands. After all, we elders and those of the council were not informed of Jiraiya being even sent out to your land. Both elders waited and noticed Walter had not even turned to acknowledge them. Hokage-sama, is it often that you have others speak on your behalf? Walter inquired to the Hokage without looking away from the Hokage. After all, as Walter then proceeded to take out the very same scroll he presented to her at the front gates of Konoha. This letter is addressed to you and you along, Hokage-sama. Walter then slowly moved around the table and handed the scroll to Tsunade directly. This is an outrage and insult. Homura shouted, trying to get Walter to look at them, but was angered greatly by the fact Walter kept smiling and he never gazed upon them. Within that scroll is the information you need to know about our visit, Hokage-sama, Walter said as he then returned to his seat and sat down, keeping his attention to Tsunade only. Tsunade nodded and took the scroll from Walter. Smirking mentally at the fact that the two old crones were not getting their desired attention, she opened the scroll slowly and was amazed, if not for the fact it was from an important letter, or notice from a foreign leader addressed to her specifically, she would have been amazed with the craftsmanship of the artwork bordering the parchment. She then coughed, getting everyone's attention as she began to read off the scroll. To Senju Tsunade, Godime Hokage * of Konohagakure * inhabiting Hai no Kuni. I write this letter on behalf of His Royal Majesty the Shadaime Kote * of the Western Empire. It is regret that I am to inform you that on the 25th of March, the shinobi that goes by the title Densetsu no Sanin Gama Shinobi Jiraiya was caught alive inside the royal palace after a failed stealth infiltration into the royal city and royal palace of Amaterasu. Under the laws of our empire and our interpretation of his action, this could be seen as an attempt on our emperor's life and therefore seen as an act of aggression that could lead to a state of war between our countries. Due to fact that Jiraiya had confessed his reason for entering our empire shortly after being captured, he was spared being immediate executed. The emperor is not without compassion and has deemed it acceptable for a lawful case to be held, with your village's best in political negotiations. A small guard detachment of no more than 6 with the 2 diplomats will be permitted from your village to go with our message deliverers to visit the royal city Amaterasu, where the emperor and his council will work towards hopefully a peaceful outcome. It is without saying that whilst visiting our city you will be kept under watch and any and all travel will be monitored. Furthermore, any attempts of contact with one Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto will be prohibited unless authorized by the emperor himself. If these negotiations prove to be fruitful for both parties, perhaps the emperor may visit the eastern nations for further diplomatic and possible trade negotiations. I personally hope that this incident shall be resolved peacefully and without complications. Written on behalf of the emperor. By Hachima, advisor to the emperor and member of the Inner Court Council. Placing down the scroll, Tsunade could only look over it with shock. They want us to send a team to represent Jiraiya in a criminal court case. She thought as the room filled with murmurs between council members while a few clan heads sat in silence. Are you serious? A voice rang out and all turned to see sitting on the shinobi side to see sitting somewhat arrogantly on his chair. It's obvious to see that Jiraiya only went to find that baka of adobe and bring him back home, not that it wouldn't matter. Uchiha-sama, need we remind you that you are not permitted at this time to voice any of your own personal opinions until the floor is open for discussion. Haruno Sayuri sweetly spoke out across the room to Sasuke, who only snorted and leaned back into his chair and ate a pocky stick loudly. Tsunade could only glare at Uchiha Sasuke and the disrespect he was showing their guests. Walter smirked and adjusted his monocle and then his gloves. The child should know to be silent. And with a quick wave of his hand he gave him a very hard glare. And let the adults talk, you disrespectful little shit. Sasuke only glared at Walter and then watched in shock as his pocky stick fell apart into very thin slices. How did he do that? Sasuke, though before his ears were assaulted by the one and only Hokage-sama, he is attacking Uchiha-sama, arrest him. Sayuri screeched whilst pointing at the Walter, resulting in all members in the room to cover their ears bar the 4 visitors. Oh, I didn't know Konoha had attained Banshee as a civilian, second brother said with the utmost honesty one could have in their voice. Meanwhile in Konoha, a certain pink-haired kunoichi sneezed loudly. Oh, Sasuke-kun must be thinking about me. giggled Sakura as she walked down the street with her groceries in hand. Back in the council room, the room instantly fell into a state of stifled giggles and snorts, besides said Screecher and Sasuke, who was glaring at Walter with his Sharingan activated. How dare you attack me? I am Uchiha Sasuke, elite shinobi of Konoha and the one to defeat Orochimaru. Walter just snorted and turned his attention back to Tsunade. Hokage-sama, we will permit you only 3 days to prepare your diplomatic team as we have a long journey ahead of us, Walter said, bowing to her before sitting down. Koharu had enough and slammed both her hands down on the table. How dare you? First you attack Uchiha Sasuke, then you have the audacity to order our Hokage on what to do. And the most important is that you show no respect to the advisors of the Hokage. Second could only let out a light laugh. Respect. It's earned, not given, and by the Gaki told us, be lucky we aren't smashing your skulls in the civilian, jerking his thumb to the civilian council side, in for how you had him live and treated for the 12 years he lived in this cesspool of a village. Walter smiled and nodded in appreciation towards second. And for your own satisfaction, elders, I was ordered by the Shadaime Kote * to only speak to the ruler of this village, which is Hokage-sama here. Whilst the advisors were fuming by what Walter and Second had said to them, knowing it was true though they would never admit it, there was one elder whose attention was fixed on the one-eyed visitor. The one called Kenpachi, who wasn't really paying attention to anyone but was his line of sight. Danzo mentally smirked. He was reported to have Biju-leveled chakra. Perhaps he can be a useful tool, Danzo thought as he slowly opened his right eye under his bandages and began to channel chakra into the stolen Sharingan. You will swear allegiance to myself and do my bidding until you are of no more use, he thought as he morphed the Sharingan into its Mangekyo form and began to cast Kodo Amatsukami * upon Kenpachi. In what seemed like an instant, Kenpachi gave a very feral grin as he stood up that seemed to tower over everyone. Kenpachi-san, are you alright? Walter asked as he looked at Kenpachi standing up with such a feral grin on his face and that look in his eye. Oh, this can't be good. Don't tell me, was what Walter able to think before Kenpachi flared his chakra and began to laugh, psychotically. Meanwhile in the Western Empire, have to wait till a bit later now to see what happens to Kenpachi or perhaps Konoha. Cheeky smiley face. It had been 2 weeks since Walter and his chosen group had departed for Hai no Kuni with only minor issues that could be left to the council to deal with. Naruto decided to have a day off and was walking around the palace in his casual outfit. I wonder what Ne-san and Ni-san are up to, Naruto muttered to himself as he walked down the corridors as he tried to forget the conversation he had with Jiraiya the first night he was locked up. Flash back to the meeting of Naruto and Jiraiya in the underground cells. Naruto. Jiraiya cried out, you're alive and okay. Thank Kami. He grunted in pain as he tried to ignore the seal activating on his chest as he reached out and tried to reach Naruto and hug him but was just out of reach. What are you doing here, Kyufu? Don't you have a onsen in Hai no Kuni or Konoha to be spying on for your research? Naruto coldly asked. Jiraiya was shocked and fell back into the cell, whilst Fukasaku sat and watched from the shadows. What are you talking about, Naruto? Jiraiya asked, shock still evident in his voice. I've come to get you out of here and take you back home to Konoha. Standing up he looked at his godson who only glared back at him with his piercing blue eyes. I messed up alright Gaki, I should have been more observant that day in the sealing room, but I promise that I will make it up to you. I have so much to teach you and of course I know how to give you back the ability to summon Toad again. Jiraiya said with a smile on his face. Looking at Naruto he couldn't help but feel worried. The Naruto standing before him stood still. He wasn't showing any kind of emotion. Isn't that great, Naruto? Jiraiya said worried. You can be just like you were before.